A blizzard is burying a forgotten highway outside Chicago, and a woman is on her knees in the snow, covering a half-conscious child with her own body while armed men close in from the dark. 40 cars have passed without stopping. Then a matte black SUV pulls over, and the man who steps out is not a rescuer. He is Lucien Voss, the most feared name in organized crime between the Mississippi and the Michigan shoreline. And he doesn't ask a single question before he gives her his coat. If you've ever watched someone make a choice that cost them everything, stay until the very last second. Hit like, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story reaches. The snow had been falling for 3 hours before it became something dangerous. Elena Cross knew the difference. She had grown up in the kind of place where winter was not a season, but a test, where you learned early to read the specific quality of cold that meant inconvenience versus the specific quality that meant you were going to have to make decisions you couldn't take back. This was the second kind. The wind had shifted sometime around 9 in the evening and started coming off the lake with an intent to it, and by the time she was on Route 47 with the boy asleep in the back seat and the fuel gauge sitting at a quarter tank, the road ahead was something she could only see in fragments, headlights cutting 20 feet into white, and then stopping. The car died at 9:43. Not dramatically, it just stopped. The way things stopped when they had been running on borrowed time and finally ran out of the ability to pretend otherwise. She had known the alternator was failing for 2 weeks, had been knowing it the way you know things you can't afford to address. And now here it was. The knowing made real on a stretch of highway between Linden Falls and nothing, in a blizzard, with a child who was running a fever and had been for 6 hours. She sat for 30 seconds. Let herself have 30 seconds of the particular high-frequency panic that rose in her chest like something pressurized. Then she moved. She got out of the car first. The cold hit her like a physical object. She was wearing a jacket that was not adequate for this. It had been adequate for October, and it was now the second week of November, and she had not had time to correct for that, had not had time to correct for a lot of things. She went to the back seat and got the boy. His name was Danny. He was 7 years old, small for 7, with dark hair that stuck to his forehead when he sweated, and the particular dead weight of a child whose body had decided sleep was the priority, regardless of circumstances. She pulled him out with his blanket still wrapped around him and pressed him against her chest and started walking. Not toward anything specific, toward the road shoulder, which was marginally more visible than the highway itself, and toward whatever logic said might eventually appear on a highway even in this weather. Another vehicle, a light, something. She kept her head down against the wind, and she kept moving, and she did not let herself think about the men who had followed her from the city, because thinking about them used energy she needed for walking. She had been walking for 11 minutes when she fell. Not a dramatic fall. A patch of ice under 3 inches of fresh snow, invisible until she was already going down. And she went to her knees hard and turned her body so Danny took none of the impact, which meant she took all of it in the hip and the palm of her left hand, which came away bleeding through the wool of her glove. She stayed on her knees because getting up immediately felt impossible, and because staying down for 3 seconds felt like the most honest response to the situation. She was still on her knees when the lights appeared behind her. She assumed it was a passing car. She had watched 47 vehicles pass in the 11 minutes she had been walking. She had counted, because counting was something to do, something to keep the mind occupied and functional when the alternative was the very loud noise that lived underneath the counting. Every one of them had passed without slowing. This one slowed. She turned. The vehicle was a matte black SUV, large, the kind of vehicle that cost more than she made in 2 years, and had probably never been used for anything as ordinary as a highway rescue. It pulled to the shoulder with a precision that said the driver was very good or the vehicle had very good systems, or both. The engine didn't die. The headlights stayed on. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the rear door opened. The man who stepped out was tall. That was the first thing. Height carried by someone who knew how to carry it, not performing it, just the fact of it. He was wearing a dark wool coat that cost more than she could calculate at a glance, and he was stepping into a blizzard at 9:50 in the evening on a road that was disappearing, and he was not moving like someone uncertain about the decision. He walked directly to her. No hesitation in the approach, no hand raised to shield his face from the snow, no squinting. just walking toward her with the directness of someone who had made a decision before he opened the door. He stopped 2 feet from her and looked at Danny first. "How long has he been out?" he said. His voice was low and even, with the quality of someone who was used to being heard without raising it. Not warm, not cold either. Just precise, the way a question was precise when it was the most important question available. "He's not out, he's asleep," she said. "He has a fever." "How long?" "Since about 4. He looked at her. In the headlight wash, she could see his face, late 30s, maybe early 40s, a jaw that was more angular than handsome, dark eyes that were doing something she would later think of as reading, the specific quality of attention you gave something you needed to understand fast. There was a scar in the corner of his left eyebrow, old, faded to silver. He reached up and took his coat off. He put it around her and the boy, not offering it, not asking, just doing it, a single efficient motion that transferred the coat from his shoulders to hers and got it around Danny's back at the same time. And then he straightened up and turned back toward the SUV. "Get in," he said. She did not get in. She stood on the shoulder of a disappearing highway in a blizzard with a borrowed coat around her and a sick child in her arms, and thought about every reason she should not get in that car, and there were a lot of them, and they were all correct. "Who are you?" she said. He was already at the vehicle. He turned, and for a moment the snow came sideways between them, and she lost the detail of his face. "Someone who stopped," he said. The wind hit her so hard the next second that she staggered. Danny stirred against her shoulder and made a small, involuntary sound that was nothing as specific as distress, but was close enough to move something in her chest. She looked at the highway, dark in both directions, snow coming faster than it had been 5 minutes ago, the road surface already indistinguishable from the shoulder. She got in the car. The interior was warm and dark and very quiet, the specific quiet of expensive sound insulation and a well-maintained engine, the kind of quiet that felt like a different category of reality from the noise of the storm outside. 2 men in the front seats. Both of them had looked at her when she got in and then looked forward again with the trained non-attention of people who were being professional about it. No one spoke. The man got in beside her. He pulled the door closed and the sound of the storm went from immediate to remote. "There's a medical kit under the rear seat," he said to one of the men in front. "And call Marcus. Tell him we need the doctor at the property within the hour." "Yes, sir," the driver said and reached for a phone. Elena looked at the man beside her. He was looking at Danny, not at her. The boy's face, the flush of fever visible now in the interior light, his slow breathing. "He needs a hospital," she said. "I know. What else does he need?" "What do you mean, what else?" "You pulled him out of a dead car on a blizzard highway at 10 at night. You're bleeding through your glove and your jacket is a fall jacket in a November storm." He looked at her finally. "What else does he need? What were you running from?" "I wasn't running from anything," she said. He looked at her for a moment. Something in his expression didn't shift exactly. It just settled, the way a judgment settled when it had been made and filed. "All right," he said. He didn't believe her. She could tell he didn't believe her. He also didn't press it, which she was not expecting. The car moved back onto the highway. She held Danny and watched the storm through the tinted window and thought about the men who had been behind her 2 hours ago, not behind her now because she had taken 3 county roads and a service route to lose them, but behind her in the sense that they were still out there, still looking, and the fact that she was now in an SUV that had stopped for her on a stretch of highway was either the best thing that had happened in the last 6 hours or the worst, and she genuinely did not know which. "Who are you?" she said again. Not aggressive, just needing to know. "Lucien Voss," he said. She knew the name. She knew it the way you knew a storm system, not because you'd been in it, but because you'd watched what it left behind. In the city, Lucien Voss was a specific kind of story, not the loud kind, not the kind with visible edges, but the kind that was everywhere in the structures of how things operated, the kind that had been woven into the city's back channels and logistics, and the way certain decisions got made in rooms that didn't appear in any official record. She had never known his face. She knew the name. She held Danny tighter. "You know who I am," he said. Not a question. Yes, she said, and you're still here. I don't have a lot of other options at the moment, she said. Something moved in his expression. Not quite humor, something adjacent to it. That's honest, he said. Danny's temperature was 102.3 when the SUV reached the property, a word that was inadequate for the compound that appeared at the end of a private road through dense tree cover, a main house and several outbuildings arranged with the functional deliberateness of something that had been designed for purpose rather than impression. Lights were on inside. A man was already at the door when they pulled up. 50s, compact, moving with the efficiency of someone called in the middle of something else and handling that without complaint. The doctor. Marcus, apparently. Lucien carried Danny inside himself. Elena followed because she was not going to be separated from the boy, and because she was not in a position to be separated from the boy, and because staying close was the only strategy she currently had, which was a significant downgrade from where she had been 18 hours ago, but was what was available. The house was warm and not what she expected. She had braced for the visual language of men who needed you to know what they had. The architecture of declared power, marble and gilt, and the deliberate performance of resources. Instead, the interior was spare and dark-wooded, and had the quality of a place that had been arranged for the person living in it, rather than for the people who might observe them. Books on actual shelves. A kitchen that smelled of coffee. Rugs that were expensive but worn. Marcus took Danny from Lucien in the hallway with the practiced authority of someone who didn't need to be told what to do next, and Lucien let the boy go without resistance, which told Elena something about him that she filed away without processing yet. This way, Lucien said to her. She followed him to a room off the main hall. Sitting room, 2 chairs, a low table, a fire that someone had started recently enough that it was still building. He sat in one chair. He did not tell her to sit in the other. She sat anyway, because standing was becoming a problem, and she was not going to let him see that. He looked at her hand. The glove was off now. She had pulled it off in the car when the blood started to stiffen the wool, and the cut across her palm was not serious, but was not nothing. He got up and went to a cabinet and came back with a basic first aid kit and set it on the table between them without comment. She cleaned and dressed her own hand while he watched, not hovering, just present. "Tell me about the boy," he said. "He's sick," she said. "His name?" "Danny." "Your son?" She tied off the bandage, set the kit down, looked at him directly. "Why does it matter?" "Because if he's not your son," Lucien said, "then the situation you're not telling me about is larger than I thought." He was looking at her with the same quality of attention he had on the highway, reading, processing, building a picture out of the pieces she was giving him and the spaces between them. She was aware that she was sitting in the home of a man whose business was understanding the structure of things and that she had been in his company for 40 minutes, and he had already located the specific uncertainty she was trying to manage. "He's not my biological son," she said. "How long have you had him?" 3 days. A pause. Something in his posture shifted, almost imperceptible, just a slight forward recalibration, the physical expression of attention increasing. 3 days. He said. "Yes." "And the people you were running from?" "I told you told me you weren't running from anyone," he said. "And I noted that, and I'm giving you the option to update it." She looked at the fire. It had built to something steady now, throwing orange light across the floor. Outside the windows, the storm was audible, the particular muffled howl of wind against good insulation. She thought about the men who had been behind her on Route 47. She thought about where they had come from and what they wanted and whether the car being dead had actually saved her, thrown off their GPS maybe, given her those 11 minutes on foot that she hadn't accounted for, and maybe they hadn't either. She thought about Danny's toy dog, which was in the interior pocket of her bag, which was in the SUV, and which contained something she had not yet told anyone about. "The people behind me were professionals," she said. "I don't know specifically who sent them. I know what they want." "Which is?" She looked at him. "The boy," she said. Lucien Voss didn't move, didn't shift, didn't react, didn't do any of the visible things a person did when information arrived that rearranged the situation. He just absorbed it the way a structure absorbed a load, taking the weight and redistributing it without showing strain. Why? He said. Because of something he has, she said. What does a 7-year-old child have that sends professionals onto a blizzard highway after him? She was quiet for a moment. She was running the calculation. What to tell him, what not to tell him, whether telling him anything was the correct decision or whether the correct decision was to take Danny and leave as soon as Danny was stable enough and figure out the next step from there. She had been running that calculation since he said his name in the car, and she had not arrived at a clean answer yet. The less you know, she said, the safer you are. Something crossed his face. Not offense, something more complicated and more personal. I stopped on a highway for you, he said, in a blizzard, with professional contractors apparently somewhere behind you. I'd like you to consider that I have already accepted some degree of proximity to your situation, and am asking to understand what that proximity actually means. It was the longest thing he had said. She noticed that it was delivered without any edge in it. Not threatening, not pressing, just the plainest possible statement of a reasonable position. 3 days ago, she said, I was driving home from work, late. I took a shortcut through the Delwood district because the highway was backed up. She stopped, organized what she was going to say and what she wasn't. There was a disturbance in the street. I almost didn't stop. I was running on no sleep, and I had an early start, and everything in my body said drive past. She looked at her bandaged hand. I stopped. What did you find? A man and a woman, she said. Both shot. Not recently. Minutes, maybe, but not seconds. The man was already gone when I got there. The woman was... She stopped again. This part was not something she had spoken out loud yet, and speaking it made it more real in a way she was not fully prepared for. She was conscious, long enough to tell me that the boy was in the alley behind the building, that his name was Danny, that I had to take him, and I had to not contact anyone official because everyone official in that district was compromised, and that I had to keep him safe. She paused, and then she wasn't conscious anymore. Lucian was very still. She gave me something first, Serena said. Before she went, she pressed it into my hand. She looked at him. It looked like a key. It wasn't a key. It was a drive, shaped like one. I didn't understand what I was looking at until the next morning when I was 3 hours out of the city and Danny was in the back seat, and I had enough separation from what had happened to think. What's on the drive? Lucian said. I don't know, she said. I don't have the means to access it. It's encrypted beyond anything I know how to work with. She paused. But the people who have been behind me for 3 days are not using the kind of resources you deploy for nothing. Whatever is on that drive is significant enough that someone is willing to run down a woman and a sick child on a blizzard highway to get it back. Lucian stood up. Not suddenly, with the controlled deliberateness of someone who was processing something large and needed to be upright to do it properly. He crossed to the window and stood looking out at the storm, and she watched his reflection in the glass and thought about a man who had stopped on a highway for a stranger and was now standing with his back to her, trying to understand what he had walked into. Where is the drive? He said. Safe, she said. He looked at her reflection. That's not an answer. It's the answer I have right now, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, the people behind you, on Route 47, did they see the vehicle? I don't know, she said. Possibly. Then this location is potentially compromised, he said. He turned. We have approximately... He checked his watch. 4 to 6 hours before anyone covering the highway corridors works back to a sighting. Less if they have resources I'm not accounting for. He looked at her directly. I need to know what I'm dealing with before that window closes. Why? She said. He looked at her. What? Why does it matter to you? She said. You stopped. You helped. The boy is being seen by a doctor. You could call a car and put us somewhere and wash your hands of it and go back to your life. She held his gaze. Why do you need to know what you're dealing with? He looked at her for a long moment in the firelight with the storm running its sounds outside the windows. Because whoever those people are, they saw my vehicle on that highway, he said, which means I'm already dealing with it. A pause. And because you're in my house. She absorbed that. And because the boy's parents are dead, he said, quieter, and someone sent professionals after a 7-year-old in a blizzard, and I want to know who. She looked at him in the firelight and thought about every calculation she had been running since she found Danny in the alley and started driving and hadn't stopped. And she thought about the key-shaped drive in Danny's stuffed toy dog, which was in the bag, which was in the car, and she made a decision. I need to get something from your vehicle, she said. She came back 3 minutes later with the toy dog. She set it on the table between them and pressed the left eye of the dog in the specific sequence she had worked out from the stitching pattern on its chest. Because the woman in the street had not given her a key, she had given her a dog, and the drive was not in her hand. It was hidden inside the toy in a way that a professional had constructed, and a desperate woman had reverse-engineered in a gas station bathroom outside Rockford at 2 a.m. The drive came out of the dog's chest cavity in its key-shaped housing. She set it on the table. Lucian looked at it, looked at her. You said you didn't know where it was, he said. I said it was safe, she said. It was. Something happened on his face. Not anger, something more complicated. The specific expression of a man recalibrating his understanding of the person across from him. Marcus appeared in the doorway. The boy's fever is responding, he said. I'd like to monitor him through the night. He should be fine by morning, but I want eyes on him. He looked between them. Am I reading the room correctly that tonight just got more complicated? Monitor the boy, Lucian said. And Marcus? He waited until the doctor was looking at him fully. If anyone contacts you tonight about this location, you tell me before you do anything else. Marcus's expression didn't change. Of course, he said, and left. Lucian looked at the drive on the table. He reached for it. Not taking it, just looking at it from closer range. I have people who can open this, he said. 40 minutes, possibly less. And then, Elena said, and then we know what we're dealing with, he said. And then you're involved, she said. Fully. You know that. He looked at her. I stopped on a highway in a blizzard, he said. I have been involved since then. She looked at the fire, at the storm outside, at the toy dog on the table with the hole in its chest where the drive had been. She thought about the woman in the street pressing the key into her hand and looking at her with an expression that was not quite trust, more like the specific, exhausted recognition of someone who had run out of better options and was choosing the person in front of them by default. She understood that expression now, from the inside. Call your people, she said. He picked up his phone. She did not hear the full conversation. She was watching the fire, and Danny was down the hall, and the storm was running its sounds along the outside of the house. But she heard enough, names she didn't recognize, clipped operational language. And then, at the end, a pause, and his voice dropping to something lower and very specific. Yes. Tell me the moment it's open. He put the phone down. He looked at her across the table. 1 hour, he said. She nodded. The hour passed. The way hours passed when you were very tired and very alert simultaneously. In strange fragments, some of them elongated and some of them compressed, and none of them quite continuous. She drank the coffee that appeared at some point, delivered by someone she didn't see clearly. She checked on Danny twice, flushed but breathing easier, the fever working its way down, his small chest rising and falling with the reliability of a machine that was functioning correctly. At 11:47, Lucian's phone rang. He answered it, listened for 4 seconds, and said, Send it to the secure line. He crossed to a desk in the corner of the room and opened a laptop. She came to stand behind him, not asking permission, and he didn't tell her to move. The screen filled with documents. Dense, structured, the kind of information that had been assembled with professional care over a long period. She started reading from the top and was 3 paragraphs in when she understood why someone had sent professionals onto a blizzard highway for a toy dog. That's... she started. Yes, Lucian said. The names on the screen were not criminal names, or not only criminal names. They were political names, federal contractor names. Names she recognized from news cycles and public records, and the specific category of person whose involvement in anything irregular would have consequences that cascaded outward into every structure they touched. A secret coalition, years of construction, payments, agreements, operational plans, and buried near the bottom of the third document, the thing that made Lucian's breathing change in a way she could hear from 18 inches away. The names of every independent crime organization in the city, listed as targets, with timelines. They're going to move against every independent syndicate, she said. All at once, he said, coordinated, using federal resources they control. His voice was very flat. They've been building toward this for 4 years. And the drive, she said. The evidence is the only thing that stops it, he said. Which is why Danny's parents had it. Which is why... He stopped, looked at the screen. Which is why they're dead. Elena stood in the warm room with the storm outside and the sick boy down the hall and the names of 40 powerful people arranged on a screen in front of her, and she thought about a woman in a street pressing a key-shaped drive into her hand with the last of what she had, and she thought she knew. She knew what was on it, and she knew what it would cost to carry it, and she handed it to a stranger on a street in the Delwood district at 11 at night, because a stranger was what was available, and available was enough. Lucien closed the laptop. He sat with his hands flat on the desk for a moment, not still in the controlled way, but in the way of someone letting something that has just arrived finish arriving. One of my captains, he said, knows this location. She looked at him. There are 3 people I trust with the address of this property, he said. One of them has been acting in a pattern for the last 6 weeks that I have been choosing to attribute to stress. He picked up his phone. I need to know if I've been wrong about that. He dialed. Let it ring. 7 times 8. Cut the call. Dialed again. Same result. He put the phone down on the desk with the specific, controlled placement of a man who was not going to express what he was feeling through the phone. We need to move, he said. Now. She was already moving. Already thinking about Danny, about the doctor, about the drive and the laptop, and what needed to be taken and what needed to be left. How long do we have? If I'm wrong about my captain, he said, we have all night. He stood up. If I'm right. The window on the north side of the room lit up orange. The sound followed a half-second later. Not the sound of an explosion exactly, more the sound of something large and pressurized giving way all at once. The specific violence of a structure failing faster than structures were supposed to fail. The outbuilding on the north perimeter. Lucien was already moving toward the door, and Elena was behind him, and somewhere down the hall, Danny was in a room with the doctor, and all of that needed to be in her hands in the next 30 seconds. She ran. She got Danny first, out of the bed and into her arms, the boy confused and hot and heavy with interrupted sleep, his arms coming around her neck with the automatic grip of a child who understood at some level that this was not the moment to ask questions. Marcus was already in the hallway, medical bag in hand, his face doing the specific thing faces did when the situation had just changed category entirely. Lucien appeared at the end of the hall. He had something in his hand that she was not going to look at closely. North vehicle is clear, he said, to no one in particular and everyone simultaneously. We have 4 minutes. She ran toward him with Danny in her arms and the drive in her jacket pocket and the specific clarifying fury of someone who has spent 3 days running and has just realized that running was not the strategy that was going to end this. Behind her, through the north window, the orange light was getting brighter, and Danny's hand pressed against her collarbone as she ran, tightened around the chain of a small silver tag she hadn't noticed before. A tag that had been around his neck since she found him, that she had assumed was a medical alert, that she had never looked at closely enough to read. In the light of the burning building, for one fractured second, she saw the engraving, not a medical alert, a name, and below the name, a case number, a federal case number. She ran through the door into the blizzard and did not stop. The blizzard had gotten worse. Elena understood that abstractly, worse than what they had already been inside, worse than the highway, worse than the burning outbuilding behind them. And then she stepped through the door into it and understood it completely and physically, the wind hitting her face like something with intent, the snow no longer falling so much as moving horizontally across the ground in sheets that made the distance between the house and the north vehicle approximately 30 feet of near-zero visibility. She had Danny. He was awake now, not fully, the fever still pulling at him, but awake enough to know something was wrong, awake enough to have his face pressed hard against her neck and his arms around her with the grip of a child who had learned in the last 3 days that the grip mattered. She kept her head down and she moved. Lucien was ahead of her, already at the vehicle. A second SUV, dark like the first, parked on the north side of the property in a position that now made sense to her as deliberate. A secondary exit point accounted for in advance. He had the rear door open. 2 men she hadn't seen before were already in the front seats with the engine running. She got in. He got in. The door closed and the storm went remote. Marcus was not with them. She registered that after 2 seconds. The doctor. Separate vehicle south exit, Lucien said. He knows what to do. She looked at him. In the vehicle's interior light, his face was very controlled, which she had learned in approximately 4 hours meant the thing underneath was not controlled at all. Your captain, she said. Yes, he said. He told them. That's my current conclusion, he said. The vehicle was moving, not fast because fast was not possible in this visibility, but moving, the driver navigating by instrument and by the kind of knowledge of a property that came from having used it multiple times in multiple conditions. She watched the orange glow of the burning outbuilding disappear behind the tree line. Danny's hand was still on the chain around his neck. She covered it with hers, not moving his hand away, just covering it, warm over his small, cold fingers. He let out a breath and pressed closer. The tag, she said. Lucien looked at her. He had seen her face in the second before she ran through the door, had seen what she looked like when she read what was on the tag in the firelight. He hadn't asked yet. She understood that was its own kind of discipline. It's a federal case number, she said. He was quiet for 3 seconds. Show me. She shifted Danny without waking him fully and lifted the chain enough for the tag to catch the interior light. Lucien leaned forward and read it. She watched his face. The scar at the corner of his eyebrow, the jaw. The specific quality of a man reading something that is rearranging the architecture of what he thought he understood. He sat back. That case number, he said. His voice was very flat. Is from a federal investigation that was officially closed 14 months ago. He paused. An investigation into the assassination of my father. The vehicle moved through the blizzard. Elena held a 7-year-old boy with a federal case number around his neck and looked at the man beside her and thought about a woman dying in a street in the Delwood district pressing a drive into the hands of a stranger, and she thought, she knew exactly what she was carrying. She knew exactly who needed to have it, and she couldn't get it there herself. So she found a stranger. Danny's parents, Elena said. Who were they? I don't know yet, Lucien said. But the way he said it, the weight in it, the specific quality of someone who was beginning to suspect they did know and was not ready to confirm it, told her that was not fully true. She let it sit. She was learning the architecture of what he held close and what he released, and she was learning it fast because she did not have the luxury of learning it slowly. The vehicle reached a secondary road, paved, cleared more recently than Route 47 had been, the blizzard still working on it but losing. The driver increased speed by a degree, and Elena felt the change in her body, the slight relaxation of a physical system that had been operating at maximum tension for hours. Where are we going? She said. A location that my captain doesn't know about, Lucien said. How many of those do you have? Fewer than I'd like, he said. More than 0. The secondary location was 40 minutes south, through the kind of flat winter landscape that existed outside Chicago in all directions, and looked identical to itself regardless of where you were in it. Fields under snow, bare tree lines, the occasional light of a farmhouse set well back from the road. The property they arrived at was smaller than the first, a single structure rather than a compound, set back from a county road behind a long gravel drive that was buried under 8 inches of snow and navigated entirely by the driver's apparent memory of where it was. Inside, functional, heated, stocked, the specific kind of prepared that you recognized when you had been in enough situations to understand what preparation looked like from the inside. A cot in the back room where she put Danny, a kitchen where someone had left supplies that were recent enough to still be good, a main room with a table and a laptop that Lucien opened before he sat down. She came back from settling Danny and found him at the table with the laptop open and his phone in his hand, and the expression of a man doing 4 things simultaneously and doing all of them with the particular focus of someone who had been in crisis management long enough to have optimized the process. She sat across from him and did not ask what he was doing, because she could see what he was doing, running the document file from the drive again, cross-referencing names, building a map of the network they were now inside, whether they had chosen to be or not. After 12 minutes, he said without looking up, "Casimir and Dara Wren." She looked at him. "Danny's parents," he said. Casimir Wren was a forensic accountant, 12 years with the Federal Task Force on Organized Crime Finance. He paused. Dara Wren was his wife. Former prosecutor, 8th District. She retired 4 years ago. Another pause, longer. They were found in the Delwood district 3 days ago. Officially ruled a robbery gone wrong. "It wasn't a robbery," Elena said. "No," Lucien said. "It was not." He looked at the screen. Casimir Wren was the lead analyst on the investigation into my father's murder, the one that was closed 14 months ago. His voice was doing the flat, precise thing. He was closed out when the investigation was officially ruled inconclusive, but he kept working it. He turned the laptop toward her. "The drive is not just political corruption documentation. There's a secondary file set I missed in the first read. It's everything Casimir Wren spent 14 months building after they shut him down." She leaned in and looked at the screen. The secondary file was dense. Financial forensics, the kind of documentation that was built number by number over a very long time by someone who understood that the structure of money was the most honest record of what people actually did, regardless of what they claimed. She could not read most of it. She could read the conclusion section, which Casimir Wren had written in plain language that she understood was deliberate. Written for someone who would find it without being an accountant. Written to be understood fast by whoever ended up holding it. She read it. She looked up. "He knew who killed your father," she said. "Yes," Lucien said, "and it's on this drive." "Yes. And the network that killed his parents and has been chasing us since Route 47 is the same network that had your father killed." "Yes," Lucien said. She sat back. She thought about the woman in the street, the drive, the toy dog. The tag around Danny's neck with the federal case number. Not a medical alert, not an accident, placed there deliberately by parents who understood that if something happened to them, the tag was the one piece of information that could orient whoever found their son toward the right context. They had planned for their own deaths. They had planned for Danny. "They weren't running," she said. Lucien looked at her. "Casimir and Dara Wren," she said. "They weren't trying to escape. They were trying to deliver the drive. The blizzard, the district being on foot, they were moving towards something, not away from it." She held his gaze. "Someone killed them before they got there, and Dara had enough left to get the drive into the first hands available." She paused. "Mine." Lucien was quiet for a moment. "Where were they going?" "I don't know," she said. "Think about the district," he said. "Delwood. What's in Delwood?" She thought. "Residential. Some commercial. The old courthouse annex." She stopped. "Say it," he said. "The Federal Records Archive," she said. "The secondary annex. It's been decommissioned for 2 years, but the physical records are still—" She stopped again. "You can file a formal evidence submission through the annex even when it's not fully operational. It goes into the permanent federal record immediately, before anyone can intercept it." "If you get there in person with physical evidence," Lucien said, "and file through the annex submission protocol, it bypasses every digital checkpoint that the network on this drive has access to." He was looking at her with the reading quality. "They were 40 minutes from the annex when someone found them." 40 minutes, she said, "on foot in the Delwood district at 11 at night." "Which means someone knew their route," he said. "Precisely. Someone inside the network who knew they'd try the annex. Or someone inside the investigation that officially closed," he said, "who was watching in case Casimir kept working it." She felt the cold of that move through her the way cold moved through a building when the heat failed in Boss. Not fast, not dramatic, just the slow, pervasive settling of it into every space. How many people knew Casimir was still working the case? Outside his immediate family, Lucian said. The people who closed it. Which are people on this drive, she said. Some of them, he said. His phone vibrated on the table. He looked at it. The expression that crossed his face was something she had not seen before. Not the controlled flatness, not the recalibration, something older and more personal. He looked at it for 3 full seconds before he answered. Voss, he said. She could hear the voice on the other end imperfectly. Male, older, unhurried in the way of someone who felt no pressure from the current situation because they had constructed the current situation. You found the woman, the voice said. I assumed you would. You've always had the instinct for that. Lucien said nothing. The drive she's carrying is incomplete, the voice said. I want you to understand that before you spend significant resources on it. The files Casimir Wren compiled are genuine, but they're missing the source documentation that would make them actionable. Without the source documents, it's a compelling story with no legal weight. And you have the source documents, Lucien said. I have access to them, the voice said, as I have access to most things. What do you want? Lucien said. His voice was very flat. Not cold, flat. The specific register of someone removing everything that wasn't necessary. I want the drive, the voice said. And the woman and the boy delivered to an address I'll provide. In exchange, the network on that drive dismantles its operations targeting your organization. You keep your structure, you keep your position, you lose 3 days of inconvenience and a coat. A pause that contained something that might have been amusement. Lucien, you stopped for a stranger on a highway. That's admirable. But you're not equipped for what she's carrying. Tell me something, Lucien said. The Voss investigation, my father. A pause. Shorter, with a different quality. That's not relevant to this conversation. It's relevant to mine, Lucien said. Who arranged it? Deliver the drive and the... Tell me, Lucien said, or this conversation is finished. A long pause. The storm outside. Danny breathing in the back room. Elena watching Lucien's face in the lamplight. Your father was going to expose the coalition's financial infrastructure, the voice said finally. 14 years ago. Before it was ready to withstand exposure. He had to be managed. Managed, Lucien said. I'm sorry for the personal dimension, the voice said. That's genuine. He was a direct man, and in different circumstances I would have... Lucien ended the call. He set the phone on the table and looked at it, and Elena watched him breathe. 1 breath. 2. The chest moving with the deliberate control of a person managing something that wanted very badly to be unmanaged. You knew him, she said, the voice on the phone. She had heard enough to know that it was not a stranger. The familiarity ran both directions, the specific texture of 2 people who had shared a context for a long time. Yes, Lucien said. How long? 17 years, he said. He's been my financial advisor since before I was in a position to need one. He looked up from the phone. Silas Mercer. The name meant nothing to her. She could see from his face that it meant a great deal to him. Not in the way of a revelation, more in the way of a confirmation that had been available for a long time and that he had been choosing not to look at directly. He built your organization, she said. The financial architecture of it, Lucien said. The infrastructure. He knows every account, every route, every legitimate business front, every structure that keeps the operation viable. He paused. He knows where everything is. Which means he's been the most dangerous person in my organization for 17 years, Lucien said, and I did not see it because I was looking for threats from the outside. She absorbed that. She thought about Casimir Wren's 14 months of post-closure investigation, about a forensic accountant who had the skills to follow money through complex structures and who had apparently followed it directly to a man named Silas Mercer and had not survived the finding. The captain who gave up the property location, she said. Silas? Connected to Silas, Lucien said. Directly or through the network. I don't know the chain yet. He stood up, started moving. Not aimlessly, with the purposeful circulation of someone thinking through their hands, checking things, touching the edges of the room. He said the drive is incomplete, missing source documentation. Is he lying? Silas lies the way most people breathe, Lucian said. But he doesn't lie uselessly. There's no benefit in lying about the drive being incomplete if it isn't. It would just send me looking for something that didn't exist. So the drive is incomplete, she said. Casimir Wren built a two-part case, Lucian said. The analysis file, which we have, and the source documentation. Original documents, not forensic reconstructions. Physical originals. He stopped moving. If he was 40 minutes from the annex when he was killed, he wasn't carrying the source documents with him. Too much risk. If they intercepted him, he'd lose everything. So where are they? She said. He looked at her, then he looked toward the back room where Danny was sleeping. She followed his gaze. She thought about the toy dog and the drive inside it and the tag around Danny's neck, and parents who had planned for their own deaths with the methodical care of people who understood that their window was closing and that the most important thing was what survived them. She stood up and went to the back room. Danny was on his side, sleeping with the slow reliability she had been monitoring for 3 days. The fever broken enough to let him rest properly, his small chest moving with the rhythm of genuine sleep. She looked at him for a moment. He was wearing the same clothes he'd been in since she found him. She had managed a change of shirt, but not much else. The chaos of the last 3 days not accommodating for much practical care. He was wearing his shoes, because she had never fully let him be settled enough to take them off. His shoes. She looked at his winter boots, thick, insulated, the kind designed for a Midwest child's winter, with a broad sole and a Velcro strap across the top that she had been fastening and unfastening for 3 days. She picked up the left one and turned it over. Then she felt along the inside of the sole, along the lining, and found the seam that was slightly different from the others. Not factory, slightly newer, the thread a fraction of a shade different. She brought the boot to the table and put it in front of Lucien without a word. He looked at it. At her. She found a pocket knife in the kitchen drawer. There was always a pocket knife in a kitchen drawer. And worked the false seam open carefully, and the lining peeled back, and there were 4 folded documents inside the boot, dense with the specific typeface of official federal filings, with original signatures and case notations and dates going back 11 years. She set them on the table. Lucien looked at them for a long time. Source documents, he said. Casimir Wren put his entire case in his son's boots, she said. The room was very quiet. Outside the storm ran its sounds against the building. Continuous, indifferent, the storm not caring about any of this. Lucien sat down. He started reading. She sat across from him and let him read, and she watched his face move through the documents the way faces move through things that were simultaneously illuminating and devastating, the specific expression of someone receiving answers they had needed for 14 years that confirmed what they had most feared and were relieved to finally know. 37 minutes later, he looked up. It's complete, he said. The case is complete. With the drive and these documents together, he stopped. Every name on this drive can be prosecuted. Every operation can be traced. The coalition collapses from the inside if this reaches the right point of entry. The annex, she said. Delwood. Casimir Wren's route. We finish what he started, Lucien said. Silas will be watching it, she said. He knows where they were going. Yes, Lucien said. He'll have it covered. Yes. So we can't go through the annex directly, she said. Not without. He stopped. His phone vibrated again. Different number this time. He looked at it and something shifted in his face. Not the Silas expression, something different. He answered, listened for 12 seconds, said, how many? Listened again, said, hold the perimeter, I'm 20 minutes out, and ended the call. He looked at her. The remaining loyal people in my organization are at a fallback location in the city. 3 of my captains. They've been trying to reach me for 6 hours. He paused. One of the 3 is Garrett Cole. He's been with me for 11 years. You trust him, she said. I did, he said. This morning I would have said absolutely. Now I'm running the question again on everything I thought I knew for certain. Do you have a choice? She said. He looked at her. Not a comfortable one. You need bodies, she said. People who know the city and know the network and can run a route to the annex that Silas isn't covering. Yes, he said. And you have 3 captains waiting who may or may not be clean. Yes, he said. Then we go, she said. And we figure out which ones to trust when we're there. He looked at her for a long moment. In the lamplight, the scar at his eyebrow was very visible, and his eyes were doing the reading thing, and she sat still and let him read. You're not going to wait here, he said. It was not a question. Danny and I have been 3 days ahead of these people, she said. The moment you leave, that changes. We stay together. He's sick, Lucien said. He's better, she said. And he's 7, and he has been separated from every stable thing in his life for 72 hours, and I am the only continuous presence he has had, and I am not leaving him in a safe house while I... She stopped, organized it. We stay together. He was quiet. You gave me your coat on a highway, she said. I did not ask you to. You made a decision, and it brought you here, and I did not make you any promises about what here was going to look like. She held his gaze. But we stay together. Lucien Voss looked at her, the full, undivided attention of a man who had been reading people for a living for 20 years. And then he said, Get the boy ready. We leave in 10 minutes. She was already moving. Danny woke up confused and warm, and she dressed him in the back room with the efficiency of someone who had become, in 72 hours, very practiced at the mechanics of caring for a child under pressure. He looked at her with the dark eyes that had been slightly glazed with fever for 3 days and were clearer now, more present, more 7 years old. Are we moving again? He said. Yes, she said. Is the man coming? He said. Yes, she said. He considered this. He's big, he said. Yes, she said. Is he going to help us? Danny said, with the directness of a child asking the only relevant question. She looked at him. She thought about a man stepping out of a matte black SUV on a blizzard highway without asking a single question and taking his coat off and putting it around a stranger and a sick child. She thought about him reading those documents for 37 minutes with the specific expression of a man who had just been handed 14 years of grief assembled into evidence. Yes, she said, he's going to help us. She put Danny's boot back on his foot, the left one, resealed as well as she could manage, the documents now in the interior pocket of her jacket, and she picked him up and carried him to the main room where Lucien was already at the door with his phone and his expression and whatever he carried that lived underneath the expression. He looked at Danny. Danny looked at him with the evaluating frankness of a child. Hi, Danny said. Hi, Lucien said, and his voice was different from every register she had heard from him. Not the operational precision, not the controlled flat, not the reading quality. Something simpler. The voice of a man who did not spend much time talking to children and was answering the one in front of him with the directness it deserved. You're not going to drop her, right? Danny said. When we run, you're not going to drop Elena. Something moved through Lucien's face. No, he said. I'm not going to drop her. Danny considered that assessment, appeared to accept it. Put his face back against Elena's neck. She met Lucien's eyes over the top of Danny's head, and they held there for a second. Not long, not soft, just the specific mutual acknowledgement of 2 people who had made a decision together and were about to find out what it cost. He opened the door. The blizzard came in. They moved into it, and the city was 40 minutes south, and the 3 loyal captains were waiting, and somewhere in that city Silas Mercer was sitting with 17 years of access to everything Lucien had built and was making his own calculations about what came next. The vehicle moved through the white dark of the storm, and Elena held Danny and the documents and thought about Casimir Wren's route to the annex. 40 minutes on foot, cut short, and thought we're going to finish it. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know yet, with the snow coming and the city approaching and Lucien driving in the focused silence of a man who was running his own calculations, was that one of the 3 captains waiting for them had received a call from Silas Mercer 45 minutes ago, and had answered it, and had said yes to whatever was asked, and was now sitting in a fallback location in the city, waiting for Lucien Voss to walk through the door. The fallback location was a commercial laundry operation in the Kessler district, A legitimate business on paper, the kind that processed linens for mid-tier hotels and generated enough unremarkable traffic that vehicles coming and going at irregular hours registered as nothing worth noting. Lucien had used it twice in 7 years. It was on the short list of locations his captain did not know about, which was the only reason he was willing to drive toward it now. He had called ahead. 2 of the 3 captains were already inside. The third, a man named Briggs, had said he was 20 minutes out with a vehicle problem, which was either true or was the specific kind of delay you manufactured when you needed time you couldn't ask for directly. Lucien had noted that. He was noting everything now with the particular exhausting attention of someone who had discovered that the filter they had been using to sort trustworthy from untrustworthy was compromised and needed to be rebuilt from scratch in real time. Elena felt the quality of his silence in the vehicle and understood it. She had Danny in her lap, the boy fully awake now, alert in the way children became alert when the adults around them were tightly wound, picking up the frequency even without the specifics. She had her hand over his, and she was watching the city come back around them, the density of it returning after the open blizzard highway, streetlights and storefronts, and the muffled urban life of a city that was still functioning despite the storm accumulating on every horizontal surface. "Garrett Cole," she said. "What about him?" Lucien said. "You said you trusted him. 11 years. "I said I did this morning," he said. "And now?" He was quiet for a moment. "Now I'm running it again." "What does running it again look like?" she said. "It looks like going through 11 years of decisions and looking for the ones that could have gone differently if someone wanted them to," he said. "Moments that felt like bad luck that could have been something else. Operations that failed at specific points that would have required someone inside to facilitate." "How many are there?" He said nothing. "Lucien," she said. "Enough that I should have looked harder," he said. 3 years ago, maybe 4. She absorbed that. The vehicle moved through the Kessler district streets, the driver navigating a route that she understood was not the direct one, longer, with turns that doubled back on themselves, watching for anything that moved with them through 2-direction changes. "The captain who gave up the first property," she said. "The name." "Decker," he said. "Is Decker going to be at the laundry?" "Decker is no longer reachable," Lucien said, and the flatness of that sentence contained a specific meaning she didn't press. The laundry was a low building on a block of similar low buildings, light in the high windows, a loading dock on the east side where a single truck was backed in. The driver pulled to the south entrance and Lucien got out first and stood for 3 seconds in the blowing snow reading the exterior before he moved to the door. She followed with Danny, the boy's legs around her hip now, his head up and watching. Inside, heat, the industrial smell of detergent and steam, the sound of machines running that provided enough ambient noise to make surveillance difficult. Through the main floor and into a back room where 2 men were waiting at a metal table with coffee cups and the particular posture of people who had been waiting a long time and were managing their readiness. Garrett Cole was the one on the left. 50s, compact, a face that had been weathered by the specific kind of life that left marks you didn't discuss. He stood when Lucien came in, not deferential, more the reflex of a man who had been in a specific relationship with another man for 11 years and had specific habits around it. The other captain was younger. Roman Vega, early 40s, quieter, watching Elena and Danny with an expression that was not hostile but was absolutely assessing. "You're late," Garrett said. Not accusatory, just noting. "There were complications," Lucien said. He did not sit. He stood at the edge of the table and looked at both of them with the reading quality, doing it openly now rather than disguising it as something else. "Tell me about the last 6 hours. Both of you. Where you were, who you contacted, what you know about what happened to the North property." Garrett looked at him. "You're running us." "Yes," Lucien said. A pause. Something moved through Garrett's face that she could not read. Not offense. Something more complicated. "All right," he said. "I was at the Meridian warehouse when the alert came. Roman contacted me at 11:40. We relocated here per protocol and I've been trying to reach you since." He put his phone on the table. "You can pull the call log." "I will," Lucian said. Garrett didn't move the phone. Decker did it, he said. The property location. I don't know what he was paid or who approached him, but it was Decker. I've had my concerns about him for 8 months. I should have said something sooner. Why didn't you? Lucian said. Because he's been with us for 6 years and I didn't have anything that wasn't a feeling, Garrett said. And I have learned in this work not to move on feelings without evidence. Lucien was quiet. Then, Silas Mercer. The name landed in the room. Roman Vega's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. Garrett's expression did something specific and controlled. What about him? Garrett said. He called me tonight, Lucien said. He had detailed knowledge of the Route 47 situation, the property location, the contents of a drive that has been in Ms. Cross's possession for 3 days. He has been orchestrating the network on that drive from the inside of my organization for an unknown period of time. He paused. He had my father killed. The room was very quiet except for the industrial machines. Garrett put both hands flat on the table. Say that again, he said. Very low. Silas arranged the contract on my father 14 years ago, Lucian said. The documentation is on the drive and in the source documents Ms. Cross is carrying. Garrett was silent for 8 seconds. She counted them. His hands on the table were motionless, and she could see in the stillness of them the specific effort of someone holding something very large, very still. I have known Silas Mercer for 16 years, Garrett said. I know, Lucian said. He came to your father's service, Garrett said. He stood there and... He stopped, his jaw set. That man stood at your father's service. Yes, Lucian said. Another silence. Then Garrett picked up his coffee cup and drank the rest of it in one motion and set the cup down and said, What do you need? Elena released a breath she had been managing for the duration of that exchange. Danny's hand found her collar and held it with the small reflexive grip she had come to understand as his way of anchoring himself when the room felt unstable. Roman Vega had not spoken. She looked at him. He was looking at the table with an expression she could not fully parse, not the processing that Garrett was doing, something different, smaller, more internal. Lucian said to her low, Take Danny to the side room. There's a break room through that door. Water, chairs. Give me 10 minutes. She looked at him. 10 minutes, he said. She took Danny to the break room. She did not fully close the door. She could hear the conversation in fragments through the ambient machine noise, Lucien's voice, Garrett's, the operational shorthand of men working through a logistics problem. She heard Roman Vega speak once, briefly, asking a question about the annex route. She heard Lucien answer it. She looked at Danny. He was sitting on a plastic chair with his hands in his lap, looking at her with the clear, unclouded attention of a 7-year-old who had decided she was the reliable variable in his current situation and was watching her for information about the state of things. Are we okay? He said. We're working on it, she said. That means not yet, he said. That means not yet, she confirmed. He nodded slowly. My dad used to say that, he said. We're working on it. When things were bad, he looked at his hands. He said it a lot at the end. She sat down next to him. She did not say anything, because there was nothing to say that was adequate, and she had learned in 72 hours that Danny Wren was a child who could tell the difference between adequate and inadequate. She put her arm around him. He leaned against her. They stayed like that for 7 minutes. Then Lucien appeared in the doorway and looked at her with an expression that said the 10 minutes had produced something and it was time to move. She stood up, put Danny down, took his hand. In the main room, the dynamic had shifted. Garrett was on his phone at the far end of the table, speaking quietly and quickly, working something. Roman Vega was standing near the door with his jacket on, which meant he had been designated for something exterior. Lucien came close and spoke low. The annex has 2 approaches. Silas will have the primary covered. It's the obvious route, the one Casimir Wren was using. But there's a secondary access through the old utility corridor that connects to the basement filing area. It requires someone with physical knowledge of the building. Do you have someone? She said. Garrett does, he said. A contact from the decommission period. She was on the facilities team when they closed the annex 2 years ago, and she kept a set of access codes that were never formally invalidated. He paused. He's reaching her now. And Roman, she said. Lucian looked at her. The reading quality. Roman is running a counter route, he said, drawing coverage away from the primary approach, so our window at the secondary is cleaner. She looked at Roman Vega near the door, jacket on, ready. She thought about the fragment of his expression she had seen at the table, the small internal thing. She thought about a captain receiving a call from Silas Mercer 45 minutes ago. She thought about the question he had asked about the annex route, the specific question, which was not a logistics question so much as a location question. She looked at Lucien. He was already looking at her. Something passed between them that was not a conversation, but carried the weight of one. The specific understanding of two people who had been reading the same room from slightly different angles and had just arrived at the same conclusion simultaneously. Lucien said to the room, "Roman." Roman looked up. "Change of plan," Lucien said. "You're staying here. I need you on communications." Roman's expression did something very small and very fast. She saw it. She was certain Lucien saw it. "I thought the counter route—" "Garrett will handle the counter route," Lucien said. "I need you here." A pause. "All right," Roman said, and the pause was exactly the length of a man recalculating. Lucien looked at Garrett, who had come off the phone. A look passed between them. Brief, direct, the look of two men who had worked together long enough to communicate efficiently. Garrett put his phone in his pocket. "Contact is confirmed," he said. "She'll meet us at the utility entrance in 40 minutes. "We move in 5, Lucien said. Elena had Danny's hand, and she was watching Roman Vega from the peripheral edge of her attention. Not directly, because looking directly would tell him she was looking. He had moved from the door to the table. He had his phone in his hand in a way that suggested it was going to be in use the moment he had privacy. She leaned close to Lucien. "His phone," she said, very low. "Before we leave." Lucien didn't look at her. "Handled," he said. She didn't ask how. She was learning which questions mattered and which ones were just the need to understand everything, which was a need she was going to have to keep managing. They left through the south entrance, same way they came in. Lucien, Elena, Danny, Garrett, and 2 additional men she hadn't seen before who had materialized from some part of the building she hadn't been in. The driver who had brought them from the secondary safe house stayed with the vehicle. She noted the departure. 1:05 in the morning. Blizzard still active, though the wind had shifted again and the snow was falling more vertically now, accumulating rather than driving. The streets in the Kessler district were quiet. 2 plows had been through, judging by the track patterns, but were losing the argument with the ongoing accumulation. She carried Danny. He had stopped asking questions and was watching the city from the position of someone conserving energy, the specific, intelligent quiet of a child who understood that conservation was currently the correct strategy. The convoy moved in 2 vehicles. She was in the lead vehicle with Lucien and Garrett. In the vehicle, Garrett said to Lucien, without preamble, "Roman called someone in the 4 minutes between when you told him the plan and when we left." "I know," Lucien said. "His phone was supposed to be neutralized." "It was," Lucien said. "He had a secondary. It was in his left interior pocket. He palmed it when he moved to the table." "Did he get through?" "Unknown," Lucien said. "We have to assume yes." Garrett absorbed that. "Then the utility entrance is potentially compromised." "Potentially," Lucien said, "which is why we're not using it." Elena looked at him. "The utility entrance was the plan I told Roman," he said. "We're going in through the loading dock on the west side. Garrett's contact is meeting us there instead. I called her back while you were in the break room." She sat with that. "You changed the plan before we left." "Yes." "You knew about Roman before I said anything." He looked at her. "I had a strong suspicion," he said. "Your read confirmed it. And you let him stay at the laundry." "With no working phone and 2 men I trust watching him," Lucien said. "He's not going anywhere and he's not communicating anything further tonight." She was quiet for a moment. She thought about Roman's expression when Lucien told him the counter route was changing, the small, fast thing that had moved through his face. "How long has he been working for Silas?" "I don't know yet," Lucien said. "That's a question for when this is finished." Garrett said from the front seat. 3 captains. Decker confirmed. Roman suspected. That's 2 of my 11 years of judgment calls that were wrong. Or they were right when you made them and wrong later, Lucien said. That's generous, Garrett said. It's accurate, Lucien said. People change allegiance. That's not always a failure of the original read. Garrett said nothing else. The vehicle moved. The Delwood district came back around them 40 minutes later. She recognized it. The specific landscape of the neighborhood where she had found Casimir and Dara Wren in the street, though they were coming in from the south end rather than the residential blocks where it had happened. The annex building was a 3-story structure from the 1940s, brick and concrete, with the specific look of a government facility that had stopped being actively used but had not been allowed to fully become something else. The west loading dock was at the end of a service alley that ran between the annex and the adjacent building. Their vehicle stopped at the alley entrance. Garrett got out and stood in the snow for a moment, reading the alley, looking for what was there and what should be there and wasn't, and what shouldn't be there and was. Then he walked 20 feet in and stopped and said something low that she couldn't hear. A figure stepped out of the shadow near the dock. Female, 50s, bundled against the storm in a way that made her silhouette completely generic. She and Garrett exchanged something, words, an object, possibly both. And then she walked back into the alley and kept walking and was gone in the snow before Elena had fully registered her. Garrett came back. Loading dock is clear. Access codes are current. We have a problem. What problem? Lucien said. The submission terminal in the basement filing area is the one we need, Garrett said. Hardwired, not networked. Data goes directly to the Federal Archive mainframe, bypasses everything digital. He paused. There's only one active terminal. It's in a room that requires a physical key for entry, not a code. She didn't have the key. Where's the key? Lucien said. Building supervisor's office. 3rd floor. Garrett's expression was the flat, informational look of a man delivering bad news without editorializing. The building supervisor is a man named Aldous Fenn. He is not currently in his office. Where is he? Lucien said. He was picked up for questioning by federal contractors approximately 3 hours ago, Garrett said. According to her. Elena understood what that meant. Silas has him, she said, or someone connected to Silas. They took him to get the key. Or to keep the key from being accessible tonight, Lucien said. It achieves the same thing either way. She was thinking. Her hand was still in Danny's, and she was thinking the way she thought when the problem was concrete and had specific physical components that could be analyzed. The terminal, the room, the key, the supervisor. She was not an operative. She was not someone with experience in the specific kind of problem-solving that Lucien and Garrett did for a living. What she was someone who had spent 3 days improvising solutions to consecutive impossible situations and had a specific functional relationship with improvisation by now. The terminal room, she said. What's the door? Garrett looked at her. Standard commercial security door, single lock, key cylinder. How old is the building? 1947, Garrett said. Original hardware? The exterior infrastructure was updated during the active period. The interior? He stopped. The interior was partially updated. The basement level wasn't prioritized. Which means the terminal room lock may be original hardware, she said, or at least pre-1990. Possibly, Garrett said. She looked at Lucien. I need a specific tool. It's simple. You probably have something that serves the function. He looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at one of the 2 additional men who reached into a bag in the rear of the vehicle without being asked and produced something she recognized from a very different context. A tension wrench and a pick that were technically locksmithing tools and were in the bag for reasons she was not going to ask about. Can you use these? Lucien said. My first job out of college was facilities management for a property company, she said. We had a locksmith on call, but he charged by the hour, and I learned the basics fast. She took the tools. It's been 9 years. I hope the hardware is old enough to be forgiving. If it's not, Garrett said. Then we think of something else, she said. They went through the loading dock in a group, Lucien, Elena carrying Danny, Garrett, the 2 additional men. The dock door responded to the code Garrett had received and opened into a service corridor that smelled of old paper and climate-controlled dust, the specific smell of a building that had been holding things for a long time. Basement level, stairs, narrow, concrete, lit by emergency lighting that had been running on battery cycle for 2 years and was doing it adequately but without enthusiasm. The service corridor opened into a larger space, filing stacks, rows of them, the physical archive of decades of federal proceedings, boxed and shelved in the specific order of systems that outlasted the people who designed them. The terminal room was at the far end of the space. The door was metal, painted the government green of facilities infrastructure from a specific era, with a single-cylinder lock that she looked at for 3 seconds and felt something loosen slightly in her chest. Original hardware. Pre-1970, based on the cylinder profile. Whatever that meant in terms of her 9-year-old skills, it meant the mechanism was simple enough that simplicity was available. She handed Danny to Lucian. He took the boy without comment. Danny looked at him with the frank assessment he had been applying all night and apparently decided the situation was acceptable, because he put his head down on Lucian's shoulder with the matter-of-fact practicality of a child choosing the available option. She crouched at the lock, put in the tension wrench, felt the cylinder, put in the pick. Her hands were not as steady as she wanted them. She breathed. 4 count. The way she breathed when the noise was too loud in her chest. Garrett was watching the stairwell. Lucian was watching her. She worked the pins. 1, 2. The third one was stiff. She held the tension and worked it, and it gave. 4, 5. The cylinder turned. She stood up. Her knees were shaking slightly, which she attributed to being awake for over 20 hours and crouching on a concrete floor. She opened the door and they went in. The terminal was a beige tower unit from the mid-1990s connected to a monitor and a dedicated keyboard on a government-issue metal desk. It was running. A status light in the corner of the screen showing system active, which meant the hardwire to the Federal Archive mainframe was live. Maintained automatically. No human required. She sat at the terminal, pulled the drive from her jacket, found the USB port. Original hardware again, USB-A, which the drive's key housing was compatible with because Casimir Wren had designed it to be compatible with exactly this terminal. She understood that now, all of it built toward this specific room. She inserted the drive. The terminal recognized it. File directory appeared on the screen. She pulled the folded source documents from her interior pocket and looked at them. Physical originals. They couldn't go in through the drive. They needed to be submitted as physical evidence through the Annex protocol, which required a different process. She looked at the desk. There was a scanner, an older flatbed unit, also hardwired, also on the same direct-to-archive system. She started the submission process on the terminal, selected the full drive contents for transfer, initiated the scan queue on the flatbed for the physical documents. The progress bar on the terminal began to move. 15%. 20. She heard Garrett's voice from the doorway, low and sharp. Movement on the stairs. She did not look up. "How much time do I need?" Lucienne said from closer behind her. "What's the percentage?" 28, she said. "How many people?" Lucienne said to Garrett. "At least 3, Garrett said. "Coming down?" "Let them come to the corridor," Lucienne said. "Don't engage on the stairs." 32%. She was feeding documents through the scanner with one hand and watching the progress bar with the other, and her heart was doing something loud and rapid that she was not paying attention to because it was not relevant information. 40%. Sounds from the corridor outside, feet on concrete, no attempt at quiet, the specific sound of people who had stopped trying to be subtle because subtlety was no longer the available option. Then voices. And then, clear and close, a voice she recognized from a phone call. Silas Mercer. In the building. In the corridor, 40 feet from the room she was in. "Lucienne," the voice carried easily in the concrete space. "You chose the wrong door. I want you to know that I had 3 doors covered. The west dock was the one I left open." Lucienne said nothing. She kept scanning. 51%. "The submission won't hold," Silas said. "Whatever you're uploading, It requires verification from an authorized federal agent to be formally entered into the permanent record. You can push the files, but without a verified agent's signature, they sit in a pending queue where they can be pulled. His voice was the same unhurried quality from the phone. I have a federal judge and 2 senior agents in my network. The pending queue is not a problem for me. 60%. She stopped scanning. She looked at the terminal. She pulled up the submission protocol and read it. Fast, the specific reading speed of someone who had learned to extract relevant information quickly from dense documents. She found the verification requirement. She read it twice. She looked at Casimir Wren's source documents on the desk. On the top page in the margin, in handwriting she recognized from the letter she had found in the warehouse files. Neat, precise, forward-leaning, was a name and a 7-digit identifier. A federal agent identifier. A person Casimir Wren had written into the margin of his own source document in his own hand as the designated verification contact for this submission. A person who was still active in the federal system, whose identifier, entered into the terminal submission protocol, would constitute an authorized verification signal. She didn't know if it would work. She knew that Casimir Wren had put it there deliberately. She knew he had thought of this. She typed the identifier. The terminal processed it for 4 seconds, 73% on the drive transfer, scanner queue at 60%. Silas's voice again, closer. Lucien, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to finish a conversation we should have had years ago. You had my father killed, Lucien said. A pause. Your father was going to dismantle everything we had built, Silas said. He was going to take the organization apart because he had decided it was wrong, and he didn't consider what that meant for the people who had built it alongside him. His voice was not defensive, more the tone of a man explaining a decision that still made sense to him. He didn't ask anyone. He just decided. He was the head of his organization, Lucien said. He didn't need to ask. No, Silas said. He didn't, and I didn't ask either. The terminal chimed. She looked at the screen. Verification accepted. Submission transferred to permanent federal record. Physical document scan queued for transfer upon completion, 89%. She pulled a notepad from the desk drawer and wrote the confirmation number from the screen and folded it and put it in her pocket because the confirmation number was the proof that the submission had been entered, and the confirmation number lived in her pocket until she could get it somewhere it couldn't be lost. 94%. A sound from the corridor. Movement. Rapid. And Garrett said something sharp and the 2 additional men responded, and she did not look up. 97, 98, 99. The drive transfer completed. The scanner queue was at 82%, still running, still feeding into the archive, and it would complete whether she was at the terminal or not because the system was designed to run unattended, the whole point of the hardwire. She pulled the drive, stood up. Lucien was in the doorway. He looked at her. One question in his face, no words. Done, she said. Something moved through his expression. Not relief exactly, more the specific quality of a man who has been holding something very heavy for a long time and has just been told he can set it down. Then Silas Mercer walked into the doorway beside him and put something cold and metal against the back of Lucien's neck, and the room changed completely. Silas was not what she had constructed from his voice. He was smaller than she expected. Late 60s, a face that read as academic rather than dangerous, wire-rimmed glasses that belonged on a professor rather than a man who had been running a criminal network from the inside of someone else's organization for 17 years. He was holding the weapon with the competence of someone who had held one before but didn't do it habitually, which was in some ways more concerning than the alternative. The submission, Silas said, looking at her. Did it go through? She looked at him. I watched the terminal light, he said. I know it went through. I'm asking because I want you to confirm it. He paused. And because how you confirm it will tell me whether you've understood the part I just explained about the pending queue and the verification requirement. It went through with verification, she said. Something passed through his face. Disappointment, or a recalculation, or both. The identifier Casimir wrote in the margin, he said. He closed his eyes for 1 second, opened them. I should have burned those documents the moment I knew he was building a case. He looked at Lucien. I made a sentimental decision, and it cost me. What sentimental decision? Lucian said. His voice was very flat against the metal at his neck. I let him run the case for 14 months after they officially closed it, Silas said. I could have resolved him earlier. I chose to let him build it because I thought, incorrectly, that an incomplete case was more useful to me than a finished one, that I could use the documents he was assembling as a counter-leverage tool. He looked at Elena. Then he went and hid it in his son's shoes. And now it's in the federal record, Elena said. Yes, Silas said, with an old agent identifier that will trigger a review I can't fully suppress. He was quiet for a moment. The weapon did not move. The question now is what I do with the next 20 minutes before that review process initiates. Danny's voice came from behind Elena. Not distressed, not panicked, the clear, direct voice of a 7-year-old who had something to say and was saying it. That man hurt my parents. The room absorbed that. Silas looked at the boy. Something crossed his face that was the first thing she had seen on it that was not controlled. I know, Danny said. My dad told me. He said if someone ever came for them, there would be a man who knew what to do with what was in my shoe. He looked at Lucien. He said the man would be someone who had a reason to care. He looked back at Silas. He said the man who hurt them thought he was safe because the people who were looking for him had stopped. Silas was looking at the boy with the specific expression of someone encountering a variable they had not accounted for. He was wrong, Danny said. My dad said he was wrong about that. In the silence that followed, Garrett Cole came through the doorway behind Silas with the specific, economical movement of someone who had been waiting for the right moment to move and had just found it, and the weapon was no longer at Lucian's neck, and Silas Mercer was against the wall, and the room reorganized itself in the space of 4 seconds into something that was not resolved but was no longer the worst version of itself. Elena crossed to Danny and put her arms around him and held him, and he put his face against her neck, and she felt him shake. Not fear, she thought, or not only fear, more the specific trembling of a child who had been holding something very heavy for 3 days and had just said the thing he needed to say. Lucien was looking at Silas against the wall. The expression on his face was the oldest thing she had seen on him, not anger, not the controlled flatness, something underneath all of it that had been waiting for 17 years to be in a room with the right person and was finally there. You're going to tell me everything, Lucian said. All of it. My father, the network, every person on that drive, and every person not on it. He stood in front of the man who had built his empire and spent 17 years using the Foundation as a weapon. And then you're going to be very quiet while I decide what comes next. Silas looked at him. He looked at Danny, still shaking against Elena's shoulder. He looked at the terminal, its status light showing submission complete. He looked like a man who had run out of moves and had just noticed it. All right, he said. And somewhere above them in the Federal Archive mainframe, Casimir Wren's case finished uploading into the permanent record at 4:17 in the morning, 17 years late and exactly on time, and the scanner queue completed and the connection closed and the light on the terminal went from active to standby, and the room was very quiet except for the sound of the blizzard doing its final work outside the walls, not knowing and not caring that something had just changed inside them. Silas talked for 19 minutes. He did it with the specific, exhausted precision of a man who had been carrying a large and complex structure in his head for 17 years and had finally been relieved of the obligation to maintain it. Not confessional. There was no remorse in the delivery, no performance of regret. Just the architecture of it, laid out in the flat, informational voice of someone who understood that the game was over and that the most efficient exit was the complete one. He named names. He described the coalition's financial routing, the accounts, the intermediaries, the political contacts who had been receiving payments since before Lucien's father was alive. He described the network's operational structure, the hierarchy of the conspiracy that had been using the city's organized crime infrastructure as a resource to be strip-mined rather than an environment to be operated within. He described what he had built inside Lucien's organization and how and over what period of time, and he did it without inflection or apparent emotion, and it was the most damning 19 minutes Elena had ever sat through because every sentence was colder than the one before it. Garrett recorded it on his phone. Lucien stood against the wall and listened with his arms crossed, and an expression that she would not have been able to name if she had been asked to, something between the controlled flatness and the oldest thing she had seen on him, living in the same face simultaneously. Danny had fallen asleep on her shoulder. She was grateful for that. Some things were not for 7-year-olds to absorb. When Silas finished, the room was quiet. The terminal's standby light pulsed slow and steady. The scanner sat dark, its queue completed. Lucien looked at Garrett. Something passed between them, the compressed communication of 11 years. Garrett nodded once and took Silas out of the room with one of the additional men, and the sound of their feet on the concrete floor moved away down the corridor and up the stairs. Then it was just Lucien and Elena and the sleeping boy and the finished terminal and the blizzard pressing its sounds against the building's exterior. "The confirmation number," Lucien said. She took the folded notepad from her pocket, handed it to him. He looked at it for a moment, then handed it back. "Keep it," he said, "until the review initiates and we can confirm the submission is in permanent record rather than pending." "How long will that take?" she said. "The identifier Casimir used, do you know whose it was?" "No," she said. "I'd like to," he said. She unfolded the source document and found the margin notation again, the name above the identifier. She turned the document toward him. He looked at it. The expression on his face shifted, not dramatically, just the specific shift of something that was completing, a loop that had been open for a long time closing on itself. "Franklin Osei," he said. "He was the lead federal agent on my father's assassination investigation. The original investigation, before it was handed to the Financial Crimes Division and given to Casimir." He paused. "He retired 18 months ago. He's been out of the system for 18 months. Another pause. "Which means Casimir used a retired identifier." She looked at the terminal's standby light. "Will it hold?" "The submission is in the permanent record," he said. "The identifier authenticated it on entry. Whether the review that initiates comes back to challenge the verification method, that depends on how quickly people start pulling on the threads." He looked at her. "Which is going to happen fast. The coalition on that drive has been watching for this." "Then we need to be somewhere else," she said. "Yes," he said. She shifted Danny on her shoulder, and the boy made a sound but didn't wake. His fever was gone. She could feel that, the specific difference between a child who is hot with illness and a child who is warm with sleep. She pressed her cheek briefly against his forehead. "Normal." She closed her eyes for 2 seconds, opened them. "Where do we go?" Lucien was already at the door. "There's a decision I need to make in the next 30 minutes, he said. "It's going to change the shape of what comes after this." "Tell me," she said. "Not here," he said. "Move." They went up the stairs and through the loading dock and into the alley, and the blizzard had not stopped. It had evolved into something steadier and heavier, the snow falling in the dense, almost silent way of a storm that had committed to its work and was no longer performing, just doing. The alley was 6 inches deeper than when they'd come in. She walked through it with Danny and felt the snow through her shoes and felt nothing about that because she was past the point of feeling things about physical discomfort. It occupied a separate register from the things that were actually happening. The vehicles were where they had left them. She got in the lead vehicle and Lucien got in beside her and the driver moved without being told. "The decision," she said. He was looking out the window at the city moving past. "The submission is in the record," he said. "The review initiates at some point in the next 12 to 24 hours. The people named on that drive are going to know it's there and they're going to respond. Some of them will run. Some of them will fight. Some of them will try to pull the submission through legal mechanisms before it can be acted on." He paused. "If the submission sits in the federal system without a public component, without the information reaching outside the official channels, the coalition has time to work those mechanisms. They have judges. They have lawyers. They have the specific kind of access to the gears of the system that lets you slow it down when it's moving toward you." "You want to make it public," she said. "I want to make it impossible to contain," he said. "Which means it needs to go somewhere that official channels can't reach before it's already everywhere." She was quiet for a moment. "Casimir built a case for the official system," she said. "He built it for the annex submission, for the permanent record." "Yes," Lucien said, "and that record is now in, and it's not enough by itself." He turned from the window and looked at her. You've been carrying this for 3 days. You know better than I do what it contains. Is it enough, if it reaches the right public point of distribution, to collapse the coalition without the official system having to be the mechanism? She thought about the documents, the financial architecture, the names, the payment trails, the political connections, the specific quality of documentation that Casimir Wren had assembled, not just comprehensive, but comprehensible, written to be understood by someone without specialized training. The conclusion section in plain language. If the right people receive the right package, she said, and they have time to process and distribute before the coalition can respond, yes, it collapses. The political names alone would trigger responses that the coalition can't coordinate around fast enough. What kind of package? He said. Complete, she said. The drive contents, the source documents, Silas's 19 minutes on Garrett's phone, and the confirmation number from the submission. She held his gaze. Everything at once, to multiple distribution points simultaneously so there's no single point of suppression. I have one contact who can do that, he said. It's the last favor I have with this person, and using it ends the relationship, permanently. Is the relationship worth more than this? She said. He looked at her for a long moment. No, he said. And he pulled out his phone. She did not hear the call. He stepped out of the vehicle at a red light, standing in the blizzard on a Delwood district street at 5 in the morning, and made the call and got back in, and the vehicle moved, and he said, 2 hours. She needs 2 hours to build the distribution network and time the release. And until then? She said. Until then, we keep moving, he said, because the coalition already knows the submission happened, and they are not going to wait for 2 hours quietly. She understood that. She looked at Danny, still asleep, his weight against her side. She thought about what 2 hours looked like. What could happen in 2 hours when the people on that drive understood that their exposure window was closing and that the man who had built it for them was in federal custody, explaining everything with a phone recording the whole thing? 2 hours. The vehicle moved through the snow, and Elena held the boy and felt the specific, clarifying quality of being past fear. Not unafraid, but past the point where fear was the dominant frequency, replaced by something more functional and more exhausting. The first vehicle found them 18 minutes later. She knew it the way she had been learning to know things in the last 3 days. Not because she saw it directly, but because the driver's posture changed, a subtle anterior lean that was not his normal driving position, and Lucien's hand moved to his interior jacket pocket with the practiced ease of a reflex. Behind us, the driver said, black sedan. Been with us since Delwood. One vehicle? Lucien said. One confirmed, the driver said. Checking flanks. 2, said one of the additional men in the rear, looking at his phone, tracking something on a map she couldn't see. Parallel on the next block, pacing us. Lucien said to her, get down with the boy. If I get down, he said, and the way he said it was not a request and not a command exactly, more the specific delivery of someone who needed her to comply in the next 3 seconds and was not going to spend more than 3 seconds on the negotiation. She pulled Danny down with her, off the seat and onto the floor of the vehicle, curling around him in the specific way she had been doing for 3 days, her body between him and whatever was outside. Instinct and practice operating simultaneously. Danny woke up. He looked at her face 6 inches from his in the dark of the floor, and he didn't ask anything, just reached up and held the front of her jacket with both hands. Close your eyes, she said. He closed them. The vehicle accelerated. She felt it through the floor, the engine finding a different register, the driver committing to something. A turn, sharp, that threw her weight against the door, and Danny's grip on her jacket tightened. Another turn, faster, and then an impact. Not catastrophic, a sideswipe, the specific sound and sensation of a vehicle making deliberate contact at speed, trying to push rather than stop. Lucien said something to the driver she couldn't hear over the noise. The vehicle corrected from the impact and accelerated again. Glass above her head, passenger rear window. A crack ran through it, in a pattern she recognized. And then the driver was taking a hard left, and they were on a different surface, rougher, and she understood they were off the primary road and onto something less predictable. 2 minutes of this. 3. The sounds changed. The pursuit vehicle's still there. She could hear the engine note of them, but differently positioned. The driver said, "Lost the parallel. The sedan is still..." Another impact. Rear this time, harder than the first, and the vehicle's back end went sideways, and she grabbed for the door handle, and Danny made a sound that she felt against her chest before she heard it. The driver controlled the slide. Good driver, she thought, with the specific detached clarity of someone who was noting important things. And the vehicle straightened and the sedan came alongside instead of behind, which was a different kind of problem. She heard the door open. Lucien's door. He was out of the moving vehicle while it was still moving, which was something she processed and then stopped processing because processing it fully would have used resources she needed for Danny. She heard things she could not see. Impact sounds, not metal on metal, something more immediate, more physical. The sedan's engine note changed. Something hit the ground outside, heavy. The vehicle she was in had slowed and then stopped, and there was a period of sound that she cataloged without interpreting. Then Lucien's door opened again. He got back in. He was breathing hard. The first time she had heard him breathing hard, the specific sound of someone who had been exerting maximally and was now managing the return. She raised her head from the floor. He had a cut above his left ear. Not serious, but bleeding the way head cuts bled. More than the injury warranted, the blood tracking down past his jaw. He looked at it on his hand when he touched it, assessed it as she had seen him assess everything, and set it aside. "Sedan is out," he said. "We have a window." She got up off the floor, got Danny up. The boy looked at Lucien's jaw with the blood on it and did not say anything, but his expression was the specific expression of a child who had decided something and had not decided what to do with it yet. "I'm fine," Lucien said to him, direct, not soft. Danny nodded once. It was the most adult nod she had ever seen on a 7-year-old. The vehicle moved. She looked at Lucien's cut with the bandage supplies she still had from the night before, the first aid kit from the first safe house, which she had put in her bag out of the same instinct that had made her take the folded notepad from the desk. She pressed a gauze pad against the cut and held it there. He didn't tell her not to. She held it for 90 seconds and then taped it in place and went back to watching the city outside. "Where are we going?" she said. "The freight terminal on the south side," he said. "It's been decommissioned. No active operations, no staff. It's the largest enclosed space I control that Silas doesn't have on record." "You're sure he doesn't have it on record?" "I'm sure it was never in the financial infrastructure he built," Lucien said. "It was a personal acquisition, paid for through a mechanism that predates his involvement with my organization." A pause. "My father bought it 30 years ago. It never went through any of the formal organizational structures." She looked at him. "Your father?" "Yes," he said. The freight terminal emerged from the South Side's industrial landscape as a massive structure of corrugated steel and old concrete, set back from the river, surrounded by a chain-link perimeter that had been padlocked for years. The driver stopped at the gate, and Garrett, who had materialized in the second vehicle at some point during the last 30 minutes, got out and opened the lock with a key that he produced from his own jacket, and the gate swung inward and both vehicles pulled through. Inside the terminal, dark, cavernous, the specific quality of a large enclosed space that had been empty for a long time and had developed its own climate. High windows showing the blizzard's gray pre-dawn light, concrete floor marked with the ghost lines of old loading operations, the smell of cold metal and time. She stood in the middle of the terminal floor with Danny and looked up at the ceiling 40 feet above them and thought about the 2 hours that still had to pass. Garrett was working. Phone calls, logistics, the constant operational maintenance of a situation that kept trying to evolve. The 2 additional men set up a perimeter inside the building, moving through the dark with flashlights, checking the structure's entry points. Lucien was at the far end of the terminal on his own phone, his voice low, and she couldn't hear it, just the rhythm of it. Danny looked up at the ceiling with her. "It's big," he said. "Yes," she said. "My dad would have said something about the acoustics," he said. "He liked big spaces. He used to take me to empty parking garages and talk and listen to the echo." He was quiet for a moment. "He said that big empty spaces were honest. They didn't absorb anything. They just gave it back." She looked at him, at the small face looking up at the dark ceiling. 3 days ago, he had been a child she found in an alley, and now he was... She did not finish the thought because finishing it required a vocabulary she had not built yet. He sounds like someone who thought about things carefully, she said. He thought about everything carefully, Danny said. Mom said it was exhausting. He paused. She said it in a way that meant she liked it. She put her arm around his shoulders. He leaned into it. Lucienne came back from the far end of the terminal. He looked at the gauze above his ear. She had taped it tight enough that the bleeding had slowed. And then at Elena. 1 hour 40, he said. The distribution is being built. She's good at this. Who is she? Elena said. Someone who has been waiting for something on that drive for a long time, he said. Personally, he paused. Her brother was a federal contractor who was inside the coalition until he tried to exit and couldn't, 4 years ago. She absorbed that. The world around this drive, she was understanding, was not a collection of strangers. It was a network of people who had been damaged by the same structure from different angles and had never been able to see each other clearly enough to connect. Garrett? Lucian called. Garrett appeared from the perimeter of the terminal. Silas will have told the Coalition's security wing that the submission happened, Lucienne said. They'll be running their legal options, but they'll also be running tactical options. This location, unknown to Silas, Garrett said, but Roman Vega is still at the laundry with a phone he didn't know we knew about. The secondary phone, Lucian said. Did we get it before he could use it? Garrett's expression was the flat, informational look. He used it, he said, before we took it. 1 call, 40 seconds. Who was the call to? Lucian said. We pulled the number, Garrett said. It routes through 3 relays and comes out at a prepaid registered to a logistics company that doesn't exist. He paused. But the cell tower ping puts the receiving phone in the Kessler district at the time of the call. Which means, Lucian said, which means someone in the Kessler district received the call, Garrett said. And Roman told them whatever he knew at that point, which was the West Dock approach to the annex and the fact that Silas was in the building. A pause. He didn't know this location. He didn't know where we went after. But he knew we were in the Delwood district, and he knew the Coalition's assets were potentially compromised, which is enough for the Coalition's tactical wing to start a radius search from Delwood, Elena said. Both men looked at her. If they put assets at the Delwood perimeter and work outward from the annex along probable vehicle routes, she said, this terminal is inside a 30-minute radius depending on how many assets they have and how good their knowledge of the road network is. Lucian looked at Garrett. She's not wrong, Garrett said. How long do we have? Lucian said. Unknown. Depends on when Roman made the call and how fast they moved. Garrett checked his watch. At minimum, 30 minutes. At maximum. Don't give me the maximum, Lucian said. Give me the minimum and work from there. 30 minutes, Garrett said, and we're 12 minutes into it. Lucian turned and looked at the terminal, at the space, at the entry points, at the high windows showing the blizzard's continuing work outside. She watched him do what he did, scan, assess, build the picture, make the decision. We're not running, he said. Garrett was quiet. We stay in this building, Lucienne said. We hold it for 1 hour, 28 minutes, and then the distribution goes live, and the tactical calculus for every asset the Coalition can field changes completely. He looked at Garrett. Can we hold this building for 1 hour, 28 minutes? Garrett looked at the terminal, at the entry points, at the 2 additional men on the perimeter and whatever else was available and whatever was not. With what we have, Garrett said carefully, we can hold it for 40 minutes in a direct engagement. After that, we're working on will. Then we work on will, Lucienne said. The first vehicle arrived at the terminal's east perimeter at 6:11 in the morning, which was 17 minutes after Garrett's 30-minute estimate, which meant they had built their minimum on a foundation that included error, and the error had moved against them. Elena heard the engine note change at the perimeter, the specific sound of a vehicle slowing to a stop outside rather than passing, and she was already moving toward Danny before Lucienne said anything. She had him in her arms and was moving toward the terminal's interior structure, the old loading management offices along the south wall, elevated on a steel platform, accessible by a staircase that was essentially a vertical ladder with handrails. She went up the ladder one-handed with Danny on her shoulder, and the boy held on with the practiced grip and did not say anything at all. The elevated office was a glass and metal box that looked out over the terminal floor. From here she could see the full space, the entry points, the perimeter lights coming on as Garrett's people responded to the arrival, the ghost lines of old loading operations on the concrete 40 feet below. She could see Lucien. He was at the center of the terminal floor with Garrett beside him, and he was not moving toward cover, which she understood as a decision rather than an oversight. He was presenting himself as the visible authority of the space, which meant anyone entering needed to deal with that first. It was not a safe position. It was a strategic one. The east access door came open. 3 men, then 2 more behind them, which meant 5 through the east access, and she didn't know what was coming through the other entry points because she couldn't see all of them from the office. The 5 were dressed in the specific unmarked but uniform way of people operating as a unit without wanting to look like they were. The lead man stopped when he saw Lucien. That was interesting. The hesitation, the recalibration. He had not expected to walk in and find him standing in the center of the floor. "Voss," the lead man said. His voice carried in the terminal's acoustics, the big empty space giving it back the way Danny's father had described. "You know who I am," Lucien said. "Then you know what it means to be standing in a building I control with a mandate from people who are currently having a difficult night." "The mandate stands," the lead man said. "The mandate is from a coalition that is going to be publicly dismantled in—" Lucien checked his watch. 1 hour and 21 minutes. Whatever you were promised, you might want to think about whether the people who promised it are going to be in a position to deliver. "That's not my calculation to make," the lead man said. "Then make it anyway," Lucien said, "because the alternative is a building that none of us want to be in." The lead man looked at him for 3 seconds. Then he said something to the men behind him and they spread out, which was the end of the conversation and the beginning of something else. Elena was watching from the office, and she was doing the thing she had been doing for 3 days, running the space, identifying its components, understanding what was available. The office was elevated. It had a clear sight line to the terminal floor. It had a door that opened inward and a single staircase ladder as the only access point. She looked at Danny. He was sitting on the floor of the office with his back against the wall and his knees pulled up to his chest, his eyes clear and watchful. Not a child who had been destroyed by 3 days of this. A child who had been through enough to know that the eyes being clear was the contribution he could make. "Stay here," she said. "Where are you going?" he said. "Right outside the door," she said. "I'm not going down the stairs. I'll be able to see you through the glass." "Okay," he said. Then, "Elena." She stopped. "My dad said that the hardest part of doing the right thing was staying in the room long enough to finish it," he said. "He said most people left before they had to find out if they were actually capable of it." She looked at him for a moment, the 7-year-old who had been hiding the entire case in his shoe. "Your dad was right," she said. She went out onto the elevated platform. Below on the terminal floor, the engagement had begun. Not the dramatic, loud version, but the controlled, tactical kind that people with training conducted in enclosed spaces. Movement, positioning, the use of cover, and the contest over it. She could see Garrett working the west side of the terminal with one of the additional men. She could see 2 of the coalition's people moving toward the south wall. She could see Lucien, who was no longer in the center of the floor because the center of the floor was no longer the correct position. Moving with the same controlled deliberateness she had seen in every physical decision he'd made since he stepped out of a matte black SUV on a blizzard highway. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. "Ms. Cross?" Female voice, precise, unhurried. "I'm the person Lucien called an hour and 40 minutes ago. I want you to know that the distribution network is built and the package is staged. I'm 22 minutes from the scheduled release." 22 minutes, she said. "We're in an active engagement." "I know," the woman said. "I'm monitoring communications. I need you to confirm one thing before I release." "What thing?" Elena said. The confirmation number from the terminal submission, the woman said. I need to verify the record is in permanent status before I push the package. If the coalition has managed to move it to pending through a legal mechanism in the last hour, the package release changes. Elena pulled out the folded notepad, read the number. The woman repeated it back. A pause. She heard keyboard activity, fast. Then, permanent status, confirmed. The submission is locked. Then release it, Elena said. In 22 minutes, the woman said. Exactly on schedule. We don't have 22 minutes, Elena said. A pause. How long do you have? She looked down at the terminal floor, at Garrett, at Lucien, at 5 coalition people, and however many at the other access points, and the building that needed to hold for 22 more minutes. I don't know, she said honestly. A longer pause. 15 minutes, the woman said. I can compress the staging by 7 minutes. After that, the distribution integrity is compromised. Some nodes won't have time to cache properly. 15 minutes, Elena said. 15, the woman confirmed. Keep that phone line open. Elena held the phone against her chest and looked down at the terminal floor and thought about 15 minutes and what they cost, and she did the thing she had been doing for 3 days. She made a decision. She went back into the office. She found what she was looking for in 30 seconds. The terminal's old electrical panel, a metal box on the wall that controlled the building's lighting systems. Industrial lighting, the kind that had been installed when the terminal was active. Banks of high-output units on the ceiling that she had seen but not thought about since they arrived. She opened the panel, read the switches, found the one labeled full floor, overhead, which was the blunt designation of a system built for function rather than nuance. And she looked at the terminal floor below through the glass, and she looked at the positions of Garrett's people and Lucien's people and the coalition's people. And she made the specific calculation that she had been making for 3 days with whatever information was available, and she threw the switch. 40 feet above the terminal floor, every high-output overhead unit came on simultaneously. The effect was immediate and extreme, not just bright, but the specific disorienting quality of industrial lighting, activating in a space that had been operating in near darkness, the kind of light that removed shadow entirely and flattened depth perception and gave every person in the space approximately 4 seconds of visual recalibration before their eyes adjusted. 4 seconds was what she had aimed for. Below, she saw Garrett use them. She saw Lucien use them. She saw the coalition's people blinking and adjusting and losing the fractional advantage that the darkness had been giving them. And she watched the terminal floor reorganize itself in the new light. And she held the phone against her chest and thought, 13 minutes. Lucien looked up at the office. He found her face through the glass immediately, and what was on his face in that moment? Standing in the full overhead light of his father's terminal with the blood dried at his left ear and 13 minutes left on a clock that no one in this building except her could see, was the specific expression of a man who had just been surprised by a resource he hadn't accounted for. She held up her hand, spread all 5 fingers, twice, then 3 fingers, 13. He looked at her for 1 second, then he turned back to the terminal floor. 12 minutes and 40 seconds remaining, and the building was loud with the specific sounds of a space being contested by people who all understood that the next few minutes were going to determine which version of the next several years they were going to inhabit. And Elena Cross stood on an elevated platform in a decommissioned freight terminal with a phone against her chest and a 7-year-old behind a glass wall and the confirmation number of a federal submission in her jacket pocket. And she counted. 11 minutes. She watched Lucien move through the lit terminal floor with the deliberate economic efficiency of a man who was buying time in the specific way that only worked when you knew exactly how much time you needed to buy. And she thought, hold, just hold. 10 minutes and the east access door opened again, and 3 more people came through it, and the number had shifted in a direction that was not the direction they needed. And she looked at the phone in her hand and at the open line to the woman who was staging a distribution package in a location she didn't know. And she said into it, "Can you go at 12? The pause on the other end was 3 seconds. 11:50, the woman said. That's my absolute floor. Elena looked at the terminal floor, at Lucien, at Garrett, at 8 coalition people where there had been 5. 11:50, she said. Do it. and below her the building was still loud, and the light was merciless and even, and somewhere in the city the blizzard was finally beginning to slow, and the clock was moving toward the number that either changed everything or didn't, and there was nothing left to do but stay in the room long enough to find out. The 11 minutes and 50 seconds did not pass the way time usually passed. They passed the way time passed inside a structure under pressure, unevenly, with some seconds stretching to accommodate what happened inside them and others compressing to nothing, the clock running at the same rate it always ran while everything inside the terminal ran at a different rate entirely. Elena was on the platform above the floor with the open phone line and Danny behind the glass, and she was counting. Not on her phone. In her head, the slow internal count of someone who has converted the only reliable thing available to her into an instrument. 1,000. 1,000. She had done this in parking garages, waiting for a tow truck, and in hospital waiting rooms, and now she was doing it in a decommissioned freight terminal, while the floor below her was contested by people whose outcomes were currently uncertain. She watched Lucien. She had been watching him for 3 days in the peripheral, assessing ways she watched everything, building a picture, accumulating data points, running them against each other. Now she watched him directly, in the full overhead light she had thrown on 7 minutes ago, and what she saw was the specific thing you saw when you looked at a person doing the exact thing they had been built for. Not comfortable. That was the wrong word. Too soft for what was on the floor. Operative. Completely in the present tense. Not a fraction of attention anywhere except the 40 feet of lit concrete around him. 8,000. 9,000. 3 minutes had passed since she'd told the woman to go at 11:50. 8 minutes and 50 seconds remaining. One of the coalition's people reached the base of the staircase ladder below the platform. She saw him before he put his foot on the first rung. A young man, mid-20s, with the specific build of someone who had been training for physical situations but had not been in many actual ones. He looked up the ladder and saw her on the platform, and they had a moment of eye contact that contained a complete transaction. She understood what he was going to do, and he understood that she had understood, and he started up the ladder. She did not have a weapon. She had noted this as a fact without a plan attached to it multiple times in the last 3 days, and now it was a fact with a very specific and immediate relevance. She had the electrical panel door. It was metal, approximately 18 inches by 24, hinged on the left side, and she had left it open when she threw the switch. She took it now in both hands, and she was aware of how ridiculous this was, and also aware that ridiculous was what was available, and she held the panel door and waited. He was good on the ladder, fast, practiced. His head came above the platform level, and he reached for the railing, and she swung the panel door and the flat metal surface connected with the side of his head at the specific angle of something that had not been planned but was not nothing, and the sound of it was unpleasant, and he went back down the ladder and did not come back up. Her hands were shaking. She noted that and allowed it and kept counting. 4 minutes. 4 minutes and 50 seconds remaining. She looked at the terminal floor. The dynamic had shifted in a way she was reading from a distance. Garrett's position was stronger than it had been 3 minutes ago, one of the additional men having moved the coalition's access from the west side, and Lucien had drawn 2 of the 8 coalition people to a position near the east wall that she understood as deliberate, drawing them away from something, not toward something. Then she saw what he was drawing them away from. The east access door was open, not from outside, from inside, held open by a man she did not recognize at first, and then did recognize because she had seen him in dim light in a different building, and his name was Roman Vega, and he had been at the laundry with 2 men watching him, and he was not there anymore. He was here. He had 2 people with him, new people, not the coalition's entry team from 11 minutes ago, different people, which meant he had not just escaped from the laundry, he had made a call and received a response. He had assets of his own that Lucien had not accounted for and that Garrett had not accounted for, and they were coming through the east access door at a moment when the terminal's defensive positions were oriented to deal with the 8 people already inside. Elena's count broke. She looked at the phone in her hand, the open line. "How long?" she said into it. 4 minutes 12, the woman said. She was monitoring something. Elena could hear the quality of divided attention in her voice. "There's a complication," Elena said. I see it, the woman said. Roman Vega's separate network. I've been tracking his communications for the last 20 minutes. He has 3 people with him. Can you accelerate? I'm at my floor, the woman said. 4 minutes 12. Elena looked at this terminal floor. At Roman Vega and 3 new people coming through the east access. At Lucian's back, oriented toward the east wall where he had drawn the 2 coalition people, which was now also where Roman was entering from. She did not have time to think about what she was going to do. Thinking was a luxury of situations with margin, and this one had none. She had the platform, the elevated position, the full floor overhead lighting she had thrown, and a metal electrical panel door that she had already used once. And she had her voice. She leaned over the railing of the platform and she shouted. Not Lucian's name. His name would orient him toward her, which was not what she needed. She shouted the word she needed him to hear. East Access, 3 plus Vega, you're 6. The acoustics of the terminal gave it back the way Danny had described. Big empty space, honest, not absorbing, just returning. It carried to every part of the floor simultaneously. She saw Lucien's head come around before she finished the second syllable. She saw Garrett's position adjust. She saw the 2 additional men on the perimeter recalibrate their orientation. She also saw Roman Vega look up at the platform and find her face. And what was on his face in that moment was not the expression of a man who had been surprised. It was the expression of a man who was recalculating a target. He said something to one of the 3 people with him, and the person peeled away from the group and moved toward the base of the ladder. She had the panel door. She was getting very tired of the panel door. The person at the base of the ladder was not the same quality as the last one. This was someone who moved with the specific efficiency of training that had been tested, and they came up the ladder fast in a way that gave her less time than she'd had before. She swung the panel door, and they were already compensating for it, one arm up to absorb the impact, and the door hit the arm rather than the head, and the person barely slowed. They came onto the platform, and she backed through the office door and closed it and held the handle. The handle turned. She held it with both hands, all her weight, the specific unreasonable effort of a person holding a door against someone stronger, knowing the math and doing it anyway because the math was not the point, time was the point. 30 more seconds of time was the point. The door moved inward against her. She leaned. The door moved more. She put her back against it and dug her feet into the floor and felt her shoes slip on the industrial surface. Danny was on the floor against the far wall. He had his knees pulled up and his eyes were open and he was not panicking. 7 years old and not panicking, watching her hold a door with his father's case in her jacket pocket. The door pushed her 2 feet into the room. Then it stopped. She didn't understand why it stopped for 2 seconds. Then she heard sounds from the platform outside. A rapid physical exchange. Not long. Then the sound stopped, and the pressure against the door was gone entirely. The office door opened from outside. Lucien came through it. He was breathing harder than she had ever heard him breathe. He had a tear in his jacket at the left shoulder, and the dried blood at his left ear had been joined by fresh blood from somewhere on his right hand that she couldn't see clearly in the office's dim light. He looked at her. He looked at Danny. He did the rapid accounting of a man confirming that the things he needed to confirm were in the state he needed them to be in. 2 minutes, she said. She had resumed the count without realizing it. Approximately. He looked at her, and the expression on his face was the oldest one, the one she had seen twice before, and it was closer to the surface than either of those times. Roman? She said. Garrett, he said. Which meant Garrett had dealt with Roman, which she processed and filed. The 3 with him? She said. One of my people has a concussion, he said. The other 2 situations are resolved. He said it the way he said things that contained more than the words. Flat, exact, without asking her to look at what was inside the flatness. She looked at her phone, the open line. 60 seconds, the woman's voice said. Elena looked at Lucian. He was looking at the phone. He had heard. 60 seconds, she said. He looked at her and something moved through his face that she was not going to try to name. He looked at Danny, who was still on the floor with his knees pulled up and his eyes very clear. Danny, Lucian said. Come here. Danny got up and crossed the room, and Lucian put his hand on the back of the boy's head. Not roughly, not softly, just the specific weight and warmth of a hand that was choosing to be there, and held it for a moment. 30 seconds, the woman said. Elena held the phone and counted and watched the two people in front of her, the man and the boy, and thought about a highway and a blizzard, and a coat, and a drive and a toy dog, and a case and a boot, and 3 days of consecutive impossible things that had led to this exact office, at this exact moment, with 30 seconds left on a clock that was about to change the shape of the next several years. 10, the woman said. Then she went quiet, which meant she was no longer talking to Elena. She was doing the thing she had been preparing to do. Elena watched the phone screen. The call timer counting up. 5 seconds. 7. At 9 seconds past the mark, the woman's voice came back. "It's live," she said. "All nodes confirmed. The package is out." She lowered the phone. Outside the terminal's high windows, the blizzard's light had changed. Barely, imperceptibly, the specific shift of a storm that had finally committed to ending rather than continuing. Not dawn yet. Not close to dawn. But the sky outside the high glass was doing something different from what it had been doing for the last several hours. And she noticed it the way you notice small, honest things when the large immediate pressure had just shifted category. "It's done," she said. Lucian looked at her. "The package is live," she said. "Multiple distribution nodes. Simultaneous." He was quiet for a moment. Not the processing quiet. Something different. The quiet of a man who has been moving at maximum output for a long time and has just been given permission to stop and doesn't quite know how to do that yet. He sat down on the floor of the office, just sat down, back against the wall, long legs in front of him. She had never seen him sit on a floor. It was such a completely human thing to do that she stood and looked at it for a moment. Danny sat down next to him without being asked. Elena sat down on the other side. The three of them sat on the office floor and listened to the terminal and the blizzard and the specific quiet of 11 minutes and 50 seconds that had just finished being the most expensive 11 minutes and 50 seconds she had ever lived through, and none of them said anything, and that was exactly right. The fallout began within the hour. She didn't witness most of it directly. She was in a vehicle with Danny and a change of direction and the specific disorientation of a person who has been in crisis mode for 72 hours and is now being asked to function in a different mode without having slept. She monitored it through Lucien's operational updates and through the phone, where the woman who had built the distribution network was sending periodic status messages with the compressed efficiency of someone accustomed to monitoring information environments. By 6:45 in the morning, 3 of the political names on the drive had issued statements through their offices. Not denials, statements citing the need for investigation, the kind of language that meant legal teams had been called and damage control had been initiated, which was itself a confirmation that the documentation was real enough to require a response. By 7:20, 2 federal contractors named in the source documents had gone unreachable. Not dead, unreachable, which in the language of the situation meant they were in the process of deciding whether to run or cooperate, a decision that would make itself one way or the other within 48 hours. By 8:15, the first media outlet had picked up the package, then 3 more. Then the specific critical mass of distribution where the story was no longer suppressed because it was in too many places simultaneously for suppression to be the available strategy. She was in a hotel room by 9 in the morning, a place Garrett had arranged, clean and anonymous, with a bed and a shower and the particular luxury of a door that locked from the inside. She put Danny in the bed, and he was asleep before she finished pulling the blanket up. She sat on the edge of the bed for a while and watched him sleep and thought about nothing, which was what her brain offered when it had finally exceeded its capacity for active processing. Then she showered and changed into the clothes that had appeared in a bag outside the room door. She didn't ask how. She was done asking certain questions. And she went to the window and stood looking at the city that was waking up under its new white covering. The blizzard finally concluded, the streets beginning the slow process of becoming navigable again. The knock at the door came at 10:30. Lucien. He had changed as well. Different jacket, no blood visible. The gauze at his left ear replaced with a smaller bandage that was almost invisible. He looked like a person who had chosen to look like a person who had not just been through what he had been through, which she recognized as a decision rather than a recovery. "He's asleep," she said, meaning Danny. meaning he could come in. He came in. He stood at the window looking at what she had been looking at, the city, the white, the process of normalcy reasserting itself over the surface of a night that had been anything but. The coalition, she said. Fracturing, he said. It takes time, but the structure is compromised. When the financial infrastructure goes, and it will, the forensic accounting in Casimir's documents is thorough enough to trigger federal action within a week. The political and contractor elements lose their operational support, and they turn on each other. He paused. They always turn on each other. It's the nature of alliances built on mutual benefit rather than mutual commitment. Silas, she said, in federal custody as of 40 minutes ago, he said. He went voluntarily. I believe he decided that voluntary cooperation was the better strategic position, and that is consistent with how he has operated for 17 years. He said it without emotion, but not without something. He will cooperate with the federal investigation into the coalition. He will cooperate specifically and in detail because he does not do things incompletely. Will that reduce what happens to him? She said. Probably, Lucian said. I have made peace with that. She looked at him. Have you? He was quiet for a moment. My father has been dead for 17 years, he said. Silas spending the remainder of his life in a federal facility is not a trait I can evaluate against what was lost. It's just what happens next. He looked at the city. The wanting it to be different is separate from the accepting what is. She thought about Casimir Wren's 19 minutes on Garrett's phone, about the specific, detailed accounting of 17 years of damage delivered in a flat, informational voice, about a man who had stood at another man's service and grieved with what she now understood was the specific grief of someone who had arranged the thing they were grieving. Roman Vega, she said. Also in custody, Lucian said. The laundry operation compromised 2 more of my organizational contacts. Both of them will be addressed through the appropriate mechanisms. He paused. What I'm doing with the organization, it's going to look different. What Silas built inside it, what I didn't see, what I allowed by not seeing, that requires a response. What kind of response? She said. A structural one, he said. The legitimate business fronts that Silas designed as cover, they're actually functional. They've been generating real revenue alongside their other purposes. If I redirect the organizational resources toward those structures and away from the operations that exist only in the gray space, he stopped. It takes time. It takes the kind of sustained attention I have not historically given to building things, only to maintaining them. But you're going to try, she said. Yes, he said. She looked at Danny sleeping in the bed, the small form under the blanket, the dark hair against the white pillow. He needs to stay somewhere stable, she said, while I figure out the legal process, the guardianship, what the right path looks like. I know, Lucian said. I'm not asking you for anything, she said. I'm stating a fact that I'm working on. I know that too, he said. But I'd like to say something, if you'll let me. She looked at him. There is a property, he said, in a district north of the city. It was not part of Silas's financial architectures. It predates him. It's in my name privately. It's a house, not a compound, not anything that reads as operational. It has a yard. He paused. It has a yard and it is empty, and it does not have anyone living in it, and it has been empty for a long time. She absorbed that. I'm not asking you to stay indefinitely, he said. I'm telling you that the option exists while you figure out the appropriate path, with resources, with stability, with no structural requirements attached. No requirements, she said. None, he said. She thought about that. She thought about a coat in a blizzard and the specific quality of a decision made before any calculation was possible. She thought about a man who had sat on an office floor next to a 7-year-old without being asked to. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I'm asking, he said. He left at 11. She stood at the window for a while after he was gone, watching the city, and then she went and lay down on the bed next to Danny and was asleep within 3 minutes, which was the fastest she had fallen asleep in as long as she could remember. The formal investigation into the coalition was announced publicly 11 days later. She watched the press conference on the television in the North District House. She had taken Lucien's offer on the third day after the terminal, when the hotel's anonymous functionality had become more suffocating than stabilizing, and Danny had asked her twice if they were going to stay somewhere for longer than 2 nights. The house was what he had said it was. A house, not a statement. A yard that had been maintained by someone who came once a week and left no other trace, with a specific quality of readiness that said it had been prepared for occupancy and then waited. Danny walked through it when they arrived with the careful attention of a child mapping new territory, opening each door and standing in each room for a moment before moving on. He found the yard last. He stood at the back door looking at the snow-covered expanse of it, a large rectangle of white, edged by bare trees with the specific featureless potential of a space that had not yet been used for anything. "Can I go out?" he said. "Put your coat on," she said. He put his coat on and he went out into the yard and walked around its perimeter once, slowly, and then he stood in the center of it and looked up at the sky, which was gray with the particular gray of late November. Not storm gray, just winter gray, the color of a season that had committed to itself. She watched him from the door. He bent down and picked up a handful of snow. He looked at it in his mittened hand, then he threw it. Not at anything, just out and up, the way children threw things into space to see what space did with them. Then he started building something. She didn't know what, at first. He was just moving snow, pushing it with his hands and his feet, shaping it with the focused, arbitrary creativity of a child for whom the medium was secondary to the doing. She watched him work for 20 minutes from the doorway, the cold coming in through the open door, and she let it. When he was done, he stood back and looked at what he had made. It was not recognizable as any specific thing. It was a mound with appendages, an attempt at structure that had evolved as it was built into something only the builder could fully interpret. He stood there looking at it with the evaluating expression of someone assessing whether the output matched the intention. Then he looked at her. "Do you want to see?" She went out into the yard in her coat and stood beside him and looked at the thing in the snow. "What is it?" she said. "I don't know yet," he said. "I thought I was making something, but then it turned into something else while I was making it." He considered it. "My dad said that was how most things worked." She stood next to him in the yard of a house in the North District of a city that was in the process of reorganizing itself around the case that Casimir Wren had spent 14 months building and that his son had carried in his shoe for 3 days. And she thought about that, about how most things worked, about the thing you intended and the thing that emerged from the intention, about the woman on a street in the Delwood district pressing a drive into her hand on a Tuesday night when she had taken a shortcut because the highway was backed up. "That sounds right," she said. They went inside. She made lunch, simple, the kind of food available in a house that had been stocked for immediate occupancy rather than long-term habitation, which meant they ate sandwiches at a kitchen table that was the right size for 2 people, and the chair legs made sounds on the floor that were immediately specific and already almost familiar. Danny ate with the focused efficiency of a child who had spent 3 days eating when there was time to eat, and was now eating with the specific appreciation of a person doing an ordinary thing in an ordinary environment, which was not ordinary at all, which was in fact the hardest one thing available. He asked her, between bites, without looking up, "Are we staying?" She looked at him, at the dark hair and the clear eyes and the 7-year-old face that had been through more in the last week than most people encountered in a decade. "For a while," she said. He nodded, continued eating. "Elena," he said. "Yeah." "Thank you for stopping," he said on the street. "You almost didn't, right?" "That's what you said in the car." "You said you almost didn't." She looked at her sandwich. "Yes," she said. "I almost didn't." "But you did," he said. "Yes," she said. He looked at his lunch with the expression of a child who has completed a thought and is satisfied with where it ended. "Okay," he said. Lucien came once in the first week. Not to the house. She was not ready for that, and he understood it without being told, which she was beginning to understand was one of his consistent qualities. He met her at a coffee place 2 blocks from the house, a small neighborhood operation with bad lighting and excellent coffee and the anonymous comfort of a public space that had no significance. He looked better than the terminal. Not rested. She didn't think he slept in any way that could be described as rested, probably hadn't for years, but less pressurized. The contained quality still there, but the acute intensity of it reduced. The building rather than the emergency. The investigation, she said. Moving correctly, he said. The forensic accounting from Casimir's documents has been validated by the Federal Financial Crimes Unit. The coalition's banking infrastructure is being traced. It will take months to fully prosecute, but the structure is already non-functional. The connections between the political elements and the contractor network have been severed at every point the federal team has touched. And the families, she said, the other syndicates, the ones the coalition was targeting. Aware that they were being manipulated, he said. Not happy about it, which is predictable. The city's organized crime landscape is reorganizing. There will be conflict over some of it, there always is, but the specific coordinated elimination that the coalition was building toward is no longer a viable plan for anyone. He drank his coffee. The infrastructure Silas built inside my organization is being dismantled. It's taking time. Some of it is, I find things I didn't know were there. It's like renovating a building and finding what the previous architect hid in the walls. That's an interesting way to think about it, she said. It's the most accurate one I have, he said. She looked at her cup. The woman who built the distribution network, she said. The one you called. Yes? Her brother, she said. The federal contractor who tried to exit the coalition. Lucien was quiet for a moment. He's alive, he said. He entered federal witness protection 4 years ago. His departure from the coalition was managed in a way that let them believe he had died rather than cooperated. He has been in witness protection since. He paused. She knew he was alive. She has known for 4 years. She has never been able to tell anyone or go to him. Another pause. That changes in approximately 6 weeks when the relevant cases are formally in prosecution and the witness protection condition is modified. She sat with that. 6 weeks, she said. 6 weeks, he said. She thought about the specific weight of knowing someone was alive and not being able to say so. She thought about 4 years of that. She thought about a woman who had built a distribution network in 22 minutes at 5 in the morning for a case she had been waiting years to help break. And she thought that 6 weeks was not very long at all when you had been waiting 4 years. The coat, she said. He looked at her. The one you gave me on the highway, she said. It's in the house. Danny has been using it as a blanket. Something crossed Lucian's face that she had no word for. Not the oldest expression, something newer, something that was still finding its form. Tell him to keep it, he said. She looked at him. That's a $4,000 coat. I know, he said. She almost said something else. She didn't. She drank her coffee and he drank his, and outside the coffee place the North District was doing its ordinary Tuesday morning things, and neither of them said anything for a while, and it was the most comfortable silence she had been in for longer than she could account for. She walked back to the house in the first snowfall of December. Light snow. Nothing like the blizzard, the city's ordinary winter rather than its emergency version. She walked through it with her hands in her pockets and her face up slightly, feeling it on her forehead. She thought about the highway, about 47 cars that had passed without stopping and one that hadn't, about the specific, ungovernable quality of a decision made before any calculation was possible, and what that decision had cost, and what it had built, and how the two things were the same thing seen from different positions on the timeline. She thought about Casimir Wren at a kitchen table teaching his son that the hardest part of doing the right thing was staying in the room long enough to find out if you were capable of it. She thought she understood now what he meant. It was not about courage, exactly. Courage was too clean, too composed a word for what it actually felt like from the inside. It felt like holding a door against something stronger. It felt like counting to 1150 in a terminal while the floor below you was contested and a 7-year-old sat on the other side of glass with his knees pulled up and his eyes clear. It felt like throwing a panel door at a person coming up a ladder because the panel door was what was available, and available was what you worked with. The house came into view through the light snow. The yard was visible over the fence. Danny was out there again. She could see him from the street, standing in the center of the yard looking at the thing he had built 2 days ago. The snow had changed it, added to it. The mound with appendages was now something else. something that the weather had collaborated on without being asked. He heard the gate and looked up. He raised one hand. Not a wave, just a raise. The specific gesture of someone acknowledging a presence. She raised hers back. She went through the gate and into the yard and stood beside him and looked at what the snow had made of his construction. It was not recognizable still, but it was undeniably something, more substantial than it had been, with the accumulated snowfall filling in the spaces between his original forms and creating a coherence that the original had only gestured toward. "It looks better," he said. "It does," she said. "I didn't do anything to it," he said. "It just kept snowing." "Sometimes that's how it works," she said. He considered that, the way he considered things, with the full, unhurried attention of a child who had learned that thinking carefully was worth the time it took. "I want to learn about forensic accounting," he said, "when I'm older." She looked at him. "Like your dad." "Like my dad," he said. "But I want to know how to put the information somewhere it can't be taken back." He paused. "He did that. I want to know how he did that." "We can learn that," she said. "Together?" he said. She looked at the yard, at the thing in the snow that was better than it had started, at the gray December sky above the bare tree line, at the house behind them with its stocked kitchen and its correct-sized table and the dark wool coat that a man had taken off his shoulders on a highway and that a boy had been sleeping under for a week. "Together," she said. The snow kept falling. It kept making things different from what they had been. That was what snow did. It changed the surface of everything it touched, accumulated without asking, made the familiar unfamiliar and the unknown temporarily the same white as everything else. And underneath it, everything that had been there before the storm still held its shape, waiting for the melt to reveal whether it had survived or not. Most things had. Some things hadn't. That was the honest accounting of it, and Casimir Wren had taught his son that honest accounting was the only kind worth doing, and Elena Cross had stopped on a street in the Delwood district on a Tuesday night when everything in her said drive past, and Voss had stopped on a highway in a blizzard when 47 other people hadn't, and what those choices had cost and what they had built were the same thing, and the snow kept falling, and the yard held the shape of what a 7-year-old had made with his hands on an afternoon when he had a yard for the first time in a week and did not know yet what to make with it. He would figure it out. They all would.